Today's 560th episode of Robservations is brought to you by the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. You have 10 days left, actually 11, to submit your movie. You can make a movie in 11 days. I know people who've done it in less. They've made features in less. Ed Wood done it in less time than that. You can be better than Ed Wood, can't you? I hope so. Enter your film. Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, is I, the Duke of Dope Discourse, the master of fun and wonder, the viceroy of verisimilitude, the sommelier, I guess, of sci-fi today, also the sommelier of cinema, the Archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm back after a day off. And it's Friday. I went downstairs and got my cereal and got with my friends. Welcome to Imagination Connoisseurs, welcome to episode 560 of Robservations, a show about something that is coming out to you, Robcasting at you Imagination Connoisseurs, you, members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I have to say I've had a pretty good week. All in all, kind of professional. Did a lot of stuff. Stuff I hate to say I can't talk about yet. I hate when I say that, but it's true. You just can't. I'm the kind of guy that has learned that you don't put anything up on the IMDb until you've shot it. I've said this before, but everyone's so eager to get their name on the Internet Movie Database. Wait until you've shot your project. Really, wait until it's in the can. When it's in the can, by all means, put up your credits to your heart's content. But wait until it's shot. What's the rush? Why do you need your name on the IMDb? I mean, wait until the movie's shot. I kind of feel that way about some of the projects I'm involved in. Let's wait till they're going. There's no rush to tell anybody. I have nothing to prove. And we just put the work. The work comes out. Obviously, many of you have heard. I was a producer on John Campia's movie, and it's going to be up on Amazon. I'm not sure the date, but soon. So you can all see it. Movie trailers, a love story. I was a producer on it, and I am in it. I am talent. I'm talent both in front of and behind the camera. So that's exciting. So there you go. That's fun. It's coming out, and it's fun. The movie's a lot of fun. I'm proud of it. I'm proud to be in it. I'm proud mostly of John Campia for thinking it up and doing it. He just thought it up one day. I was thinking about this thing, and then he went and made it. And that's kind of how I think that life should be. You just think things up and go do them. And then they're done. And then you can say you did them. And I've never understood why that concept is so difficult. But apparently it is. So today, people are always asking me about books. I get stuff, I pre-order stuff. I always tell Elizabeth, I pre-ordered this a long time ago. I don't remember sometimes pre-ordering things. But I got 2 books today, and 2 of my favorite authors that Peter Hamilton, the third in his Salvation series, Saints of Salvation, and Kim Stanley Robinson. I cannot get enough of Kim Stanley Robinson, to be honest. 3 decades maybe? One was the California trilogy. The Ministry for the Future. The Ministry for the Future. Now, if you want to read some great science fiction, and it's not talked a lot about, or it's not talked enough about, but James Cameron was once involved in adapting this into, I think he was going to do it as a series, but Kim Stanley Robinson's trilogy, Red Mars, Green Mars, and Blue Mars, which is about the colonization and subsequent terraforming of Mars, is a phenomenal series. There are so many heady science fiction concepts and real science. It's great stuff, and I highly recommend it if you want to read a great science fiction trilogy that is long on real science and good characterizations. So, very exciting there. You know what else is exciting? Yes, right before I went on. So today was a big day of announcements for our friends over at Disney and Fox. Two big announcements. One this morning, Justin Kroll dropped this at 11 a.m. this morning, which I know that a lot of you have heard of this already because, hey, it's this news is 3 hours old. Deadpool 3 and Ryan Reynolds tapped the Molyneux sisters to pen the sequel, to pen Deadpool 3. Justin Kroll dropped this. As Disney continues to figure out what to do with Fox properties acquired in the merger, one of the biggest IPs, Deadpool, looks to be gaining momentum. Sources tell Deadline that Wendy Molyneux and Lizzie Molyneux, Loughlin, will write Deadpool 3 with Ryan Reynolds set to reprise his role as the wisecracking Marvel superhero. Writer meetings have been taking place over the past month, with Reynolds recently meeting with a handful of writers to hear their pitches for the next installment. In the end, the studio and Reynolds saw the sisters' take as the perfect fit for what they wanted. The film remains in early development, but the hiring of the Molyneux, it's like Stephen Molyneux, right? Sisters does mark the first major step in getting the next Deadpool film into production. So the writers have been hired. This marks the first Deadpool film where Marvel Studios will work hand-in-hand with Reynolds and Team Deadpool. Fans are sure to be excited at Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige's involvement after seeing how he helped revamp the Spider-Man franchise after coming on to help in creative efforts for that franchise. Besides Reynolds' return, there are many factors being worked out, but sources say the film is still expected, this is the big one, still expected to be rated R like the previous two installments. It is also expected to have a new director, David Leitch, who helmed the second pick, has a schedule filled through 2021, unfortunately. Insiders say the door is open for his return, as it's unknown when the film will go into production, but given that he wasn't a part of the writer's search, it seems unlikely for him to come back for Part 3. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they might want him to come back for Deadpool 3. It's just that Ryan Reynolds is calling the shots here, and he's the one that's going to be working with the writers. Either way, the film pushing forward will surely excite fans who were concerned about the film's fate following the Fox-Disney merger that some felt meant the possible end of the franchise. As for the Molyneuxes, they're sisters and writing partners who serve as the creators, showrunners, and executive producer of the new Fox series The Great North, which is set to premiere in February and has already been renewed for a second season. In addition, they are writers and executive producers of the long-running hit Bob's Burgers on Fox, for which they won an Emmy in 2017 and have been nominated for an Emmy for 8 consecutive years. They've also been nominated for 3 WGA Awards and won the Annie Award in 2017 for their episode The Harmoniums. On the feature side, they recently adapted the novel The People We Hate at the Wedding for Film Nation and the acclaimed video game The Sims for Legendary. They also wrote Jump Street, Now for Her Pleasure for Sony Pictures. I'd watch that. Lizzie attended UC Berkeley and Wendy attended Pomona. They both reside in the Los Angeles area with their spouses and many, many children and pets. So that's pretty exciting. I was like, all right, we've been banging on about the potential for Deadpool 3 for a long time. I enjoyed both Deadpool movies quite a bit. I like the first one better than the second one, but I still enjoyed both of them a lot. I thought they were a lot of fun. And the big question that everybody's been asking is, what will Fox do with their R-rated franchises? And if they do revive them, will they intend to keep them as R-rated franchises? Look, I don't know how you make Deadpool PG. It wouldn't be the same thing. The whole point of that film is the fact that it can be so irreverent and it can be R-rated. And who doesn't want to, celebrate International Women's Day the way Wade and Marina Baccarin celebrated? Because, that's always fun, right? And I think that it's great that this is happening. And I think, Disney as a company, I understand that the thing about Disney is the name of the company is the brand. Disney is Disney. So the idea of Disney making an R-rated film, which is not unprecedented because they had, of course, Hollywood Pictures before, and they had bought Miramax. So they have been making these films before, but now that everything's moving to the streaming realm, do you put R-rated films onto Disney Plus? Well, it is called Disney Plus, and they have talked about sort of walling off an area of Disney Plus that you'd need a parental password to get into. I think that's the way to go. I mean, Disney is still the parent corporation, and there's a lot of R-rated movies that are going to wind up on that service. And it's strange to me that Disney has sort of they've licensed out their other films to other companies. The Hollywood Pictures. Those movies are. Where is Ruthless People? Where's Down and Out in Beverly Hills? It's like they don't exist. Why does Disney not want to have these in their library? It's such a strange thing. I mean, they do, but they license them out to other companies. So that was interesting. And then, not to be outdone, at 12:12 p.m., so an hour later, Deadline, Mike Fleming, who you can always take to the bank, Mike Fleming dropped this story. Predator returning with 10 Cloverfield Lane Helmer, Dan Trachtenberg at 20th Century Studios. And this is an exclusive to Mike Fleming. Mike Fleming has been breaking exclusive entertainment stories for as long as I've been around, so you can take this one to the bank. 20th Century Studios has engaged 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg to direct the 5th installment in the Predator series. The script is being written by Patrick Allison. Would you say it's the 5th, Billy? Because you've got... What about Aliens versus Predator? Does that count? I don't know. The script is being written by Patrick Eisen, whose producer credits include the series Kingdom, Jack Ryan, and Treadstone. That's interesting. They're keeping the plotline under wraps for the moment, but I'm told it won't swing back the development in the most recent film. Fox made its last entry in the 2018 thriller The Predator. The film was directed by Shane Black, who was one of the original cast members in the 1987 film that kicked off the series and starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. Black played one of the team of commandos who winds up being tracked and killed in gory fashion by the extraterrestrial hunter. So that's really all they got. Not a big story, but it's interesting that I think what this does signal is, and it obviously doesn't speak to the rating, I just don't see how you can make a really effective Predator movie that's anything but R. I mean, the whole idea is he's basically hunting human beings, which means human beings are going to die in gruesome ways, which is part of the appeal of the franchise. But what I find interesting about both of these stories is that Disney is going to embrace, once again, R-rated movies. Now, I'm surprised. I'd love to get, whether you like them or not, and I think Prometheus and Alien Covenant are both monstrously huge disappointments in various ways. Prometheus is one of the best-looking science fiction movies ever made that really turned out to be quite brain dead, which is unfortunate. But I would recommend to anybody that likes the Alien franchise and likes Ridley Scott and heck, likes big budget filmmaking, to get the the Prometheus. I think it's a 4-disc special edition on Blu-ray. It has a wonderful making of documentary by my friend Charlie Lazarica, we had our weekly Zoom call last night. I get together with a group of friends of mine every Thursday, and we have a weekly Zoom call. We're about ready to start. We're going to do these now with the members for the Post-Geek Singularity shortly. But if you remember the channel. But we just do them just to keep up. Charlie's now in Atlanta, so we talk, and it's fun. But he did an incredible documentary on the making of Prometheus. And if you watch it, what's really fascinating about that documentary is you can kind of see how it was going in one direction and then it kind of fell off the rails. They brought in Damon Lindelof, and I think that there was just, competing visions. And I'm not a real big fan of hiring multiple writers on projects. I know the studios are, because it gives executives an added plausible deniability. The more writers you have, the more people you can blame if something doesn't work, right? I've never been a fan of that. I thought that when you watch that documentary, it's really interesting. You see that John Spates, who wrote the original draft, and Ridley Scott, they seem to really be on it, and they seem to have been of the same mind in developing this certain kind of a movie. And then, of course, Damon Lindelof comes on board, and then, of course, Alien Covenant. Wacky stuff. that is a maddening. It explaining away all these things bothers me, and I just think that one of the great science fiction films, one of the great horror films ever made, is the first Alien. I dare say it's a perfect movie. I mean, I think the only flaw looking back on it from 2020's perspective is that some of the graphics, the computer screens and things like that are obviously dated because the movie came out 41 years ago. But that doesn't really bother me because in my mind, I'm like, well, in this particular universe, wherever Alien's taking place, this is how the ships, this is how they look, you know? And that doesn't bother me. And of course, on the Prometheus, which takes place long before Alien, the technology is much more sophisticated looking, but it does, again, that kind of thing, I can look beyond that, unless we're of course talking about Star Trek, which I can't. But it's really good to see, hopefully, a commitment to delving more into their R-rated catalog titles, because I think Disney has to. They obviously they have what they've been doing for a long time, the better part of 100 years. And that's a good thing. You know, I think that the Disney brand, as it's known the world over, it makes families feel secure and things like that. But that's why you buy 20th Century Studios and you keep it. You buy Fox, you keep now 20th Century Studios viable so you can do what you did when you had Miramax or Hollywood Pictures. You release these movies as 20th Century 20th Century Studios films, and people will look at them and go, okay, you're not going to have people thinking the Disney brand is somehow tainted because 20th Century Studios is releasing another movie. Most people who aren't savvy about the entertainment business will just see, oh, it's 20th Century Studios. They're not making those connections going, well, that's a parent company of Disney and they're making R-rated films, so my children are not safe anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think that's not that interesting, and I don't think that that's most people care. What people do care about, getting a kick-ass Predator movie. That's what they care about. When people go to the movies, they don't care who made them. They really don't. They care if the movie's good. And I'll tell you something. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of people about, a lot of industry people, I have a lot more people, especially during this time of COVID, who have come to talk to me about this YouTube channel. A lot of people, a lot of my friends, they didn't even know that I was on Collider for 3.5 years doing Collider Heroes with John Schnepp. And they also didn't know that I was a part of the Movie Trivia Schmodown. But I have been now on YouTube for 5.5 years in some capacity. And this channel has been around almost for 2 years. Robservations will be celebrating its 2nd anniversary in mid-December, which to me is astonishing that I'm still here doing the show. But what's something that I've been trying to explain to people that work in the industry that are now looking at alternative modes of entertainment is that, like, frequently this show has run 2 hours. Now, if you think about it, if you're trying to entertain somebody for 2 hours, a motion picture can try and entertain somebody for 2 hours, and it might cost $65 million, like A Hunt for Red October or the first Matrix, or it might cost a lot more. But for an audience, it's still 2 hours of time. This show does not cost that much, at least certainly not anywhere near $65 million. Or in the case of, say, a James Bond movie, for 2.5 hours, you're looking at 250, although I've heard No Time to Die is one of the longest Bond films, if not the longest, so it's closer to 3 hours. But still, $250 million for 3 hours of entertainment. Now, the thing that people don't understand is that YouTube exists, these shows exist in a very different space than other forms of entertainment. This is more along the lines of talk shows, personalities. I mean, I would assume, I really don't know why everybody tunes in to watch me in particular. I know that in general, it's because we've created a community, and I say we've because it's all of us. It's all of us here. It's all the people that are watching right now. It's all the people that tune in and watch these broadcasts later. It's the moderators that are here. But most of all, it really is the Post-Geek Singularity community. It's all of you. But still, the idea that you guys would sit here and watch this show for 2 hours, one, it's very flattering to me. But two, what's most important is you only have so many hours in the day to be entertained. Now, the question is, when I watch a movie that's 2 hours long that I feel very unsatisfied by, or I could watch a YouTube show with somebody that, and I watch YouTube shows with pundits I like. I'll watch a Joe Rogan or a Dave Rubin if I want to see guys doing interviews with interesting people, and I'll sit down and watch them do a 2.5 hour deep dive with somebody, and I feel fulfilled. I'll watch a $10 million episode of Star Trek Discovery and feel unfulfilled. Indeed, mostly I feel angry, like with this week's episode. Discovery just makes me angry. But I kind of made a revelation about Star Trek Discovery, if I can just make an aside. Star Trek Discovery is not really a show about action, adventure, science fiction. It's not. Star Trek Discovery is a show about people's feelings. The same way that, and I don't mean that necessarily as a criticism, as a show, if that's what you want. If you want to watch a show about people's feelings and growing together and all that, I guess Star Trek Discovery is something you might get credit for. But that's not why I watch Star Trek. I think that again, they're trying to turn it into something else. But still, that's an hour of your time. And when you are spending an hour of your time, you have to feel whether or not it's been fulfilled. But the thing now is that we have so many YouTube channels that are entertaining people for the same length of time that a movie would entertain somebody for, or a great episode of television. And I think that people are starting to realize that, what is effective entertainment? How does entertainment work? And when you have something, like a lot of people were unsatisfied by the last Predator movie. I know that I was. And I was disappointed in Shane Black because I usually like his films. Now, I understand that he had interference from the studio. But I think what's really interesting in this modern age, and I see that a lot of pop culture is having this problem, is that everybody now in our culture, it's not just, everybody's worried about people's feelings all of a sudden. Like that has become something that has actually seeped into we are worried more about the feelings of the audience rather than the actual entertainment that's being made. And I think when I'm on this show, I'm very aware of the fact that I don't want to alienate my own audience and I do skirt some issues I know that people have problems with, but what I like about that is that you will write in. People feel comfortable enough that if I say something or do something that they disagree with, this show, everyone knows, you can write me a letter, take me to task, and I will read it. I think that's part of what's happening. And so, I mean, this show, I would not be doing this show if it wasn't for you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity. Because if I didn't have all of you as an audience, why do the show at all? Tilting at windmills, screaming into the ether or whatever. I mean, it's not, what would be the point? The whole point is that we have this community and this audience, and I love you all, and I do, but it's got to be entertaining for you. So the actual time people put in to entertainment, it's still the same hour or the same 2 hours. But what's really interesting is you're getting entertainment. Are you getting $65 million? Are you getting $100 million? Are you getting $200 million of entertainment? And I think that this idea, or you can tune into your favorite YouTube pundit or your favorite YouTube show and watch a show like this. There's many shows like me or other people. I like watching Jeremy Johns' reviews. I like watching Chris Stuckman. I mean, I literally tune in to watch them. And I enjoy The Critical Drinker. I was on a podcast with the Midnight's Edge guys. They decided to do a podcast. Obviously, we've been doing Bond films. I've been doing Bond films with the Ace, the Arbiter of Cinematic Excellence, and the Enchantress of Entertainment. On Whining About Movies, we delved into Bond. But Midnight's Edge, Tom at Midnight's Edge, had never seen a James Bond movie before. So the idea was to delve into all of the Bond films chronologically. And they asked me if I would join them on that journey. And I said, well, I love that idea. I think that's great. And so we did. And we did Dr. No. And it was really fun for me to talk to Tom, who had never seen a Bond film before, and to hear his impressions. And, what's interesting is he was not blown away by the Bond franchise, to be honest. He wasn't as enamored of it as, say, I have been since I came to that franchise when I was a kid. Now, he's not wrong. And it was fascinating. We sort of came to a conclusion that he was talking about other movies that came out in 1962 when Dr. No came out. I'll tell you this, and I made the point on the show. Dr. No was first released in the UK on, I believe, October 10th, 1962. And it deals with the Spectre-sponsored Dr. No, who's trying to disrupt Mercury launches or space launches from Cape Canaveral in an effort to create tension and later a nuclear war between Russia and the U.S. Not a week later, days after Dr. No debuted in UK cinemas, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. Now, I can't even imagine what that was like. We didn't get Dr. No here in the States until 63, but I can't imagine what that was like. But Tom made the comment. He said, look, I love other movies from 1962. One of my favorite movies of all time, The Manchurian Candidate, came out in 62. And also a movie like Lawrence of Arabia came out in 62. And he said it's easier for him to accept a movie like Lawrence of Arabia and to enjoy it than to enjoy Dr. No. And I found that interesting because, Lawrence of Arabia was a period piece in 1962. So when you're watching a period piece that is set in a specific time, I don't know the actual dates that Lawrence of Arabia takes place in, but it's, evocative of that time that it took place in. Whereas when they made Dr. No in 62, it was contemporary. And a lot of what was going on was contemporary. Audiences certainly recognized it as, this is today, this is now. But obviously contemporary culture changes. So in a way, Dr. No is horribly dated compared to something like Lawrence of Arabia. Because when you're looking back at a contemporary movie in 1962, that's a very different thing. You watch a James Bond movie, you watch a Daniel Craig movie, look at the difference between Dr. No and, say, Casino Royale. So the point was made, and I've always said this, that pop culture lasts 20 years. Well, Dr. No, for a lot of audiences, is simply too dated. It's hard to watch. It becomes even certainly off-putting at times because the contemporary culture in 1962 is so alien compared to today, whereas we know that Lawrence of Arabia, when the movie was made, it was already a period piece. So when you go back and you watch Lawrence of Arabia, it's a lot easier, a lot more palatable. It goes down much easier, and you're much more accepting of it. But it's still time. It's still that hour or 2 hour or 3 hour block of time, and you have to ask yourself, because your time is finite, what is entertaining to you? So back to my original question, people have been coming to me a lot over the last couple of months, and everybody wants to sort of move into the YouTube space or create their own shows, which I think is great. The more the merrier. I am not threatened by anybody creating their own YouTube show, and I like to see it when people step up their game or increase the technical prowess of their channels or whatever. But I really think that the great appeal, the thing that YouTube has, is a human being talking at you, and you can interact with that person in whatever way, shape, or form you want to. Send them letters, interact on the chat boards, on the actual videos when they're posted. You can be here live. Now, that is a different experience. That is an entertainment experience that is very different from what you watch and what you're seeing. And I think that it's all part of a shifting entertainment landscape. And I try and explain to people, how if I bring on industry professionals on my show, and this is the same is true of Collider Heroes, when we would have comic artists or industry people, they tend to be the least rated shows that you do, for at least for John Schnepp and I, and certainly for this show. And the reason being, at least in my mind, is that these are hangout shows. We're here to hang out. Like, if we were at a bar, all of us, whoever's watching right now, I would be no different at that bar than I am right now. I might be a little drunker, and people would be buying me drinks, so that would be good. It just happens. But I'm still me. Like, you're not going to see a much different version of me anywhere else. I mean, people, it's funny, I still get letters from, like, Schmodown fans who talk about, oh, you were so approachable. I'm like, I'm just that guy. I'm just, whatever. I'm me. But the idea of the time spent and where entertainment is going, it's the same way people don't understand, well, how can you kids sit there and watch other people play video games? Well, I think that the appeal of that is when you watch somebody playing a video game, you're learning yourself. I think people, I would do that. I used to watch video game tutorials. I haven't really lately because I haven't been, the last video game that I was deeply, deeply into is Grand Theft Auto 5. And I sort of skipped the PlayStation 4. I do not intend to skip PlayStation 5. I do want to jump back into the bandwagon. I miss gaming. I want to play that new Devil May Cry game. And I hope they do another Onimusha game. Come on, Capcom, get on that. And I do want to get back into that. But even video games are another form of entertainment. And I tend to think of entertainment in terms of hour-long blocks or half-hour-long blocks. I mean, I've always felt that way. And Mr. Tickle Trunk sent in a, look at that. Is that a sticker? That's pretty funny. I love that. He's farting hearts. I think that's amazing. So thank you for that. It just popped up, and it's now anyway, I don't even know where I'm going with this. I've kind of lost the plot about what I was talking about. But ultimately, it's all about entertainment. How do we feel about entertainment, and how do we feel about our time in relation to entertainment? And I think, well, with movie theaters changing and all that, I think we really have to decide, and studios are going to have to decide, like Disney, can they afford not to make an R-rated Deadpool or an R-rated Predator movie? Now, that said, that's where I was going. Can they afford to not make one that's R-rated? So I think they should. Now, this is a total 180-degree thing, but we got a package today at the house. Package today from Trinidad the Island Man, your Island Man. Now, I usually have enjoyed opening Trinidad's packages. Not this time. By the time I was informed of this package, I did not get. Trinidad's packages are kind of like opening the Ark of the Covenant. No, they're not full of sand. They're full of mythical goodness that comes down from heaven, manna from heaven. One of the things that was in the package was this necklace. Seahawks colors, redolent, and he also sent me a mask. A Seahawks mask, like, a mask that everybody has to wear, but it's got the Seahawks on it. So Trinidad the Island Man, thank you for that. And he sent us our favorite potato chips, which are amazing. And he sent everyone Lay's and the girls' stuff, and he sent me a package of reading material, which I have not yet read. But apparently one of the things in it I noticed is safety precautions for COVID in Hawaii, which is interesting. So shout out to Trinidad the Island Man, your Island Man. And thank you for a box of goodness. It certainly put a smile on the face of the ladies of the house. Of course, I smiled too, but I, of course, was not there when the goodness was opened. My favorite potato chips were there, though, so I love those potato chips. So thank you for that, Trinidad. I very much appreciate it. Another imagination connoisseur, Roberto Suarez, our man Roberto Suarez, who joined us for the GoldenEye conversation, the Puerto Geekian, as he calls himself. It is Roberto Suarez's half-century birthday today, or as he liked to call it, Roberto 5-0. So a great shout goes out to Roberto Suarez and his whole family. I hope you have a great 50th birthday, my friend. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I met you in Portland in February of this year. And we've become good friends, and he's become a good friend of the channel. And I appreciate everything he does. 50 years, man, and you're going strong. I never would guess that you were 50 years old. So happy birthday. Happy birthday to you, sir. And very, very exciting. Now, you've sent me some letters. Now, I'm going to start this one. This one comes from, guess who? Roberto Suarez. That's right. Go figure. I have a Roberto Suarez letter to read on his 50th birthday. Hey, Rob. First and foremost, thank you once again for having me as a guest for your discussion on GoldenEye on Whining About Movies. I had a total blast. So did we. I had a question regarding the recent announcement around Wonder Woman 84's release. You have mentioned that big tentpole movies like this one are financed with loans that need to be paid back within a reasonable amount of time in order to make a profit. These movies need a wide theatrical release so they can make up their money, pay their creditors, and yield profits for the studios and shareholders. Every day that these movies are not released is another day of interest accrued. Is there such a thing as a point of no return for a studio, by which they need to make the call to release the film in some way or another as to minimize their losses? I ask this because it seems like the way things played out with Wonder Woman 84, accountants and financiers at Warner Brothers must have been doing the math, projecting how much the cost of the film would grow as it waited to go into theaters. At some point, holding off will lead to a loss in profit, no matter how wide a theatrical release you have in the future, since every day the cost of paying back the loans on the movie grows. Is it safe to say that the decision to release the film on Christmas Day simultaneously to HBO Max and selected theaters was all about mitigating this loss? That it probably makes more sense to make back what they can now in order to pay their creditors and take a less impactful loss that can be written off before the end of the year? I appreciate your insights on these matters and how much I learned from them about Hollywood and the film industry. Take care, Roberto Suarez. Well, thank you, Roberto. That is a very good question. Now, let me preface this by saying I am no financial genius. I mean, I wouldn't. If I was, I probably wouldn't have a garage as the Robservatory. I'd have a really big room in a really big house in Bel Air. That would be the Robservatory, but I don't. But I do. I am a student of the industry. So here's what I imagined, and this whole COVID thing has thrown everybody for a loop. So obviously, the reason that studios will spend $150 to $250 million on a certain movie is because their previous track record has shown them that previously made films that are in the same realm can expect to generate this much revenue. So the studios are projecting into the future because they're publicly held companies and they're beholden to their shareholders and investors. So the studios are the most risk averse. They try and mitigate their risks any way they can. So they look at the first Wonder Woman and they're like, okay, that movie made over $800 million. It exceeded our expectations. So there is no reason to believe, when you have the same creative team making this film, that the movie's going to make anything less than that, because you just assume that they'll deliver the goods a second time, which is a pretty good assumption. If you want to be risk averse, you can't do better than that. So they know, and they're expecting between, let's say, $850 million and $1 billion. So when they greenlight Wonder Woman 84, they're expecting, let's face it, $1 billion. So then what they do is they go, okay, we're going to make $1 billion theatrically, and then we're going to make this much money on the ancillary market, whether it's pay-per-view, whether it's digital downloads, whether it's physical media, and a sale to a cable channel. And that's correct. Like, HBO Max doesn't just get, because it's now part of AT&T, they don't just get Wonder Woman to put on HBO Max. They have to pay for it, even though it's the same company. When I worked at Warner Brothers, you had to get a PO, a purchase order for everything, even in the same department. If you wanted paper for the copy machine, all of that has to be paid for, because where does it come from? And when you are on a studio lot, there might be 100 copy machines and you're buying paper for all that. That adds up. So every dollar that a studio spends has to be accounted for. So, and we know, and I talked about it before on the show, that they were looking to do a streaming deal for No Time to Die for a year. And see, the thing is, remember, when you hear that a movie grosses $1 billion, the studio doesn't get $1 billion. They get, depending on the deal, let's just say for the sake of argument, they usually probably get more, but let's just say for the sake of argument, they're going to make like 50% of that. They're going to get back 50% of $1 billion. So let's say they get back $500 million. All right, well, let's run that down. $200 million to, say, make the film. So they now have $300 million left. And of that, they have the studio overhead. That's right. The studio itself, their infrastructure, bills, that's part of the budget of the film, or at least it's part of the recoupment. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that whatever they're charging overhead for, let's say that's $50 million. And remember, part of studio accounting is because the studios get to write off against the production budgets of their films studio overhead, because it's still Warner Brothers. And when I worked at Warner Brothers in feature production was paid for by the production of movies eventually. So you've got that gets taken out. Marketing, let's say they spent $100 million on marketing already. So you're now looking at $350 million. That's all just recouped money. Then let's say interest payments. All right. Let's just say it. Probably not $50 million, but interest payments, other things. So on $1 billion, and by the way, these are really loosey-goosey numbers. Don't hold me to these numbers. I'm just using them for illustrative purposes. All right. So when all is said and done, when Wonder Woman grosses $1 billion, the studio, Warner Brothers, they take home, with this little loosey-goosey scenario, they make $100 million. That's their profit. $100 million on a movie that grosses $1 billion. So keep that in mind. So that's how it works, because everybody else, and China, you're not even getting that great of a split either. So $500 million of that $1 billion gross is never even seen, but it goes elsewhere to exhibitors and other places, and so the studios don't get that. However, in this day and age, if you could get a streamer to come back and say, hey, HBO Max is like, we really want to have Wonder Woman 84. We want it to drive subscribers. HBO Max might come in and go, and now this, I don't think anyone's paid this much yet, but if HBO Max came in and said, John addressed this issue the other day on his show too. HBO Max could say, they'll make a deal, and if they were to pay $400 or $500 million for Wonder Woman 84, now that's not going to happen normally, but in terms of COVID, it could. It possibly could. Then Warner Brothers is pretty much made whole. They don't have to worry. The $1 billion they needed to make with the exhibitors and all that is because they need to make $400 or $500 million on the back end from that $1 billion release. But if they're not releasing anything theatrically, well then, if they were to make $500 million or even $400 million off of a sale to a cable streamer, well, that's just the same in terms of money as releasing the film in theaters. Now, remember, these are very loosey-goosey numbers. The point that I'm making is that in this time of COVID, like nobody has ever paid that much money for a movie. No one's ever paid $500 million. And that's why we found out that MGM was looking toward getting that much money for No Time to Die. Now, the question remains is, would putting Wonder Woman, if you spent $500 million for Wonder Woman 84, if HBO Max did that, would that drive enough subscribers to their channel to make it a viable thing? So could they get, I don't know, 40 million new subscribers because they know that Wonder Woman 94 is coming, or Wonder Woman 84 and other movies like that? And if you had that, if you could lock in subscribers, like it's $15 a month, if you could get 40 million new subscribers at $15 a month based on that, I mean, the numbers obviously, again, very loosey-goosey. But you see my point. Like, could they justify that? Maybe they could make it work. And during this time of COVID, there is a number of movies. The problem is, like Disney Plus, you put Black Widow on Disney Plus, without, you just put it out there without any, is it going to just, it'd have to drive those subscriptions, otherwise you're going to lose that money. But Disney Plus is already doing very well, so putting Black Widow on, They didn't do very well with Mulan. Warner Brothers didn't do very well theatrically with Tenet. So these movies that have already been made for these exorbitant fees, $150 to $200 million, they're sitting on shelves. Their interest is being paid out on these things, holding them for a year. We heard that MGM was paying $1 million a month on No Time to Die, which is crazy. So ultimately, can they make it work? Because even though you could say HBO still has to pay for their movies, even though it's a Warner Brothers film, HBO Max still has to buy the movie from Warner Brothers or pay for the licensing fee to show it for however long, a year or whatever it is. I mean, they have to do that. So even though it's the same company, you're moving money around and it has to show on the books because it's all legit. And it's tough call. It's a tough call. But yeah, that's kind of what they have to do. And I think they've reached a point where if they were going to push Wonder Woman from Christmas, they have to push it. Maybe there'll be a vaccine. Maybe things will be back to normal by next summer. But the problem is that we have now is that even if theaters are open, they're at half capacity. And even if people can take a vaccine, it's going to take a long time for people to get back into the public en masse. I mean, I don't want to sit in a packed house anytime soon. I'd love to sit in a socially distanced house, but not in a packed house, especially with COVID cases skyrocketing. I mean, everybody acts like, yep, we're going to get this vaccine out and everything's going to be hunky-dory. Well, the best laid plans of mice and men, I don't see it happening as fast as everybody seems to think it's going to happen. So there's still a lot of time, and it'll be interesting to see where that was going. So, yeah. Devin Hilton writes in and says, I was going to ask you, any idea when my trailer for The Repairman will be uploaded to the site? Everything uploaded, so all the material should be in the house. Thank you so much for everything. Regards, Devin. Devin, I watched your trailer last night. Very intriguing. You should see that in the next day or two. And remember, that is, here's, by the way, I want to say something that's really important for the film festival. If you enter the film festival, and I have your entry form and the entry fee by December 1st, your movie can be turned in later. I want to make the cutoff point. Ultimately, it's got to be like December 15th. But yeah, if you get the entry fee in and you pay, you can actually have more time. Some people have asked that. I'm like, look, you had to enter by the 1st. I didn't say anywhere that we necessarily had to be in possession of the movie on that date. We just have to have the entry form entered and the film paid for. Because what happens is you send us your entry form and then we send you an invoice out. So as long as everything is done by December 1st, I know a few filmmakers have called frantic about can we expect can we have a couple of days leeway? And I'm like, look, here's the thing. I need enough time to get the Christmas show that's pre-recorded, and I need to be able, all of you filmmakers, I need to have you available in December at some point where I want to do an interview with everybody, because everybody who we pick as a semifinalist, because what we're going to do is I want to interview you about your film, and there's going to be a pre-recorded show that announces all the semifinalists on Christmas Day, and I'm going to drop that, and I'm going to have interviews with the filmmakers and then show the film. So it's going to be one long piece, and it should be a lot of fun. And then the semifinalists are going to the judges, and then on New Year's Day, we are going to have a live show where we give out the awards. And I know that there's a lot of people's films coming in. It was interesting because people are sending me, I didn't really anticipate people sending me trailers for their films as opposed to their finished films in general. So I know that Torrin Atkinson, we have a trailer from him, and from you too, Devin. So you'll be seeing those on the weekend going up on the channel. So look for that. Michael Preston says, Warner Brothers already owns HBO Max, so Wonder Woman 84 isn't going to be bought. It's already owned. And Discovery gets increasingly worse every episode. Well, here's the thing. Warner Brothers Studios, the parent company AT&T, owns Warner Brothers and HBO Max, but they are different companies. So make no mistake, HBO Max doesn't get a Warner Brothers movie for free. They have to pay for it. They have to pay a licensing fee. And even though you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul because your parent company is AT&T, you have to think of them as separate entities. So HBO Max does indeed have to pay for Wonder Woman. It's just like, everything that goes on within the studio, there's invoices and everything has to be paid for. So it's not like HBO Max can just put something on their service. That's why HBO Max, that's why the Snyder Cut, that Warner Brothers just couldn't finish the Snyder Cut because they're like, well, where's the money? There was no money. And until there was an entity like HBO Max that came along and said, you know what? We'll pay for it, because HBO Max has a certain budget, probably, I guess, in the billions, to make programming every year. Warner Brothers doesn't have any extra money to throw Zack Snyder $50 million or $100 million to go work on the Snyder Cut, because they have no way to get remunerated for that. So how are they going to get their money back? And whenever a studio spends money, the point is on programming, you want to have a revenue stream to bring money back in. You want to earn a profit on what you've spent. Well, that's what HBO Max did. HBO Max came along, and they have a certain amount of money. I don't know exactly what that budget is. I remember reading an article once that said they wanted to spend $1 billion on programming a year, but that's ridiculous because you're competing against Netflix, and they've got bigger pockets than you, brah. So the thing is that HBO Max then comes along and says, okay, we'll pay for the Snyder Cut, and Zack Snyder wants reshoots. It's interesting because ultimately I think the price tag for the Snyder Cut is going to be about $100 million. And I had said originally, one of the reasons why I said at first that there was not going to be a Snyder Cut or Zack Snyder's version of Justice League is because there was no one to pay for it. And this is something that I tried to make people understand when everybody was saying to me, well, Rob, there is a finished cut. It only needs a couple of $1 million to be done. I heard that over and over and over again. And all these people do you think I didn't want to see the Snyder Cut? I loved Man of Steel, and I liked the ultimate version of Batman v Superman, and I really wanted to see what Zack Snyder was going to do with Justice League. So I wanted to see it. I hated what came out theatrically from the bastardized Justice League. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they allowed that to happen, but that's neither here nor there. But why I kept saying is that there is no Snyder Cut is because, one, there wasn't a finished cut of the movie. It wasn't near being finished. And that's just something you would understand. People are like, well, I've seen cut. No, but I'm not going to rehash that. The real reason I kept saying that there isn't going to be a Snyder Cut is there was no way to pay for it. There was no way to pay for it. Zack Snyder, like Ridley Scott, has had multiple versions of his films released on home video. That was something they were able to do in post during the production of those movies. So you could get an extended version of The Martian. You could get an extended version of Watchmen. They knew they were going to do that. But with the Snyder Cut, they made Justice League. It was finished. It was done. As far as Warner Brothers was concerned, the books on Justice League were closed and the movie underperformed. That ship has sailed. When HBO Max, and I said it a year ago on this channel, I said, I'll bet you that now that there's an HBO Max, they could pay for the Snyder Cut. And lo and behold, unbeknownst to me, the same time, almost the same week, I think, that I was saying this, they began negotiations and they began talking about doing the Snyder Cut because HBO Max now had a money to pay for their productions. And it made sense. I think that HBO probably might regret how much it's wound up costing, but I think they're hoping it's going to be something special. And I don't think there's a movie that's coming out in 2021 that has its own perpetual marketing machine with fandom the way the Snyder Cut does. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't even know where I was. I'm like, wait, what? Ooh, this one comes from Jeff Allen. Jeff Allen says, hey, Rob, how are you? I hope that you and your family are doing well. I wanted to ask your thoughts on the upcoming Stand miniseries, which is going to be aired on CBS. You recently did an episode on Ezra Miller being part of the cast, and in that episode, you also mentioned that Amber Heard would be starring in the miniseries as well. Yeah, it's shot and it's done. My question is, do you think that Amber Heard and her outside legal activities will hurt that production? I'm not sure how familiar you are with this case. However, this all goes back to a lawsuit Johnny Depp filed against the British tabloid the paper The Sun for libel, in which Amber Heard claimed that Johnny Depp was a domestic abuser. During the trial, the dirty laundry of their marriage came out, making both of them seem very unlikable and flat out crazy. In the aftermath, Depp lost his trial, and as a result, he was fired by Warner Brothers from the upcoming Fantastic Beasts film. First of all, he resigned from that film. I'm sure at Warner Brothers' behest, but remember, he resigned from that film. And was fired by Warner Brothers from the upcoming Fantastic Beasts film and was released by Disney from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He is also filing a defamation case against Heard for $50 million for an interview she provided to the Washington Post in 2018 in which she accused Depp of domestic violence, which is scheduled for May 2021. As for Amber Heard, the fandom is slightly angry that there have been petitions asking for her removal as Mara from the DC Aquaman films, with Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones being mentioned as a possible replacement, in addition to receiving vicious comments on various social media sites. My question is, do you think that the fandom will accept Amber Heard in the Stand miniseries, since the trial with Johnny Depp is still fresh in people's minds? Will it impact the viewership of the miniseries? Will it impact her role as Mara in the upcoming Aquaman films? I'm interested to know your take on this, and thanks for reading. Very good questions, Jeff. Not something I would normally, deal with or really speculate on, only because, we live in a really weird time, and I would say that there have been tempestuous marriages throughout history. People have been driven crazy, and there have been high-profile marriages like this. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor being the one that pops into my mind first. Honestly, Johnny Depp, I had this conversation with John Campea, and he made the point. I said, look, people's private lives can be very different places than their public lives. And, we're really sympathetic when somebody says, man, we know that Chad Boseman, that man was dealing with cancer the entire time he played Black Panther. And apparently his last role he's coming out in this film is getting incredible notices. He knew, look at how thin he is. He knew what was going on, and he never, ever, ever let on. And that man was a warrior. I can't even imagine what he went through, and he didn't let it affect his work. The kind of mental discipline that requires. He was truly an extraordinary human being, and a true loss. But the point was, we didn't know anything about it. He did it quietly. And I'm sure he did that. Can you imagine social media now if they knew that he was battling terminal cancer? I mean, it would have been a massive distraction for him. And he would not have been able to. The great thing about what Chad Boseman did was he left this planet and he lived the life he wanted to, and he left the life the way he wanted to leave it. And he was able to concentrate on his work and leave an incredible legacy behind him. I can't imagine if his condition was known, and what would have how frustrating it might have been for him not being able to complete as much work as he wanted to complete. But nowadays we know everything about everything, and Johnny Depp has a long history of relationships with other women that have supported him. Vanessa Paradis being one. He had children with her, and I think people's personal lives and their work lives are very, very different things. And now we live in a world where everybody wants blood and retribution for everything. And I think probably knowing what went on, and I don't know, I wasn't there. I think that both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were, they probably had a very volatile love affair that turned into a love story, and it became very tempestuous. And there's never been any instance, and John said on a show, well, there's never any instance when somebody gets angry and murders somebody else. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But I think, do people get pilloried for the rest of their lives? Should they lose their jobs because they get into a relationship with somebody that is not good for them? Again, do I advocate if people are physical with one another? No, you should never be physical with each other. But the reality is men and women have been being in physical altercations with one another since the dawn of time. Is it good? No. Should it happen? No. But it does happen. and, deal with it in the courts. I just don't know what that has to do with Johnny Depp playing Captain Jack Sparrow, or Grindelwald. I don't know. I understand because it's a corporation has to look out for its image and wonders if the audience suddenly is not going to show up or pillory their project online because the studio continues to employ a serial abuser of some kind. That's a huge consideration. And if you choose to work in a public business such as movie making, you have to be extra careful to not wind up in courts where you're beating your wife. I mean, this is just something that it's unfortunately it's a byproduct of the life you have chosen. And, if you're going to be a public persona and you're going to get paid tens of millions of dollars, a studio expects you to keep your nose clean while you're working for them. It's academic. Do I think that Amber Heard should be taken out of the stand or no? I mean, I don't. Unless, of course, it turns out that she, too, was as abusive as apparently Johnny Depp was to her. But was she having an affair? Was she seeing Elon Musk while she was married to him? Does that get taken into consideration? Perhaps, maybe in the courts, but I don't think that if she had an affair with Elon Musk, that she should be removed from something that she's already shot. Plus, I think she's playing Nadine Cross, who's a bad character anyway, so maybe it'll play into it all. But no, I think here's the thing. If you become an actor and actress and you're commanding millions of dollars and you're in the public consciousness for decades, I think it's probably best that you don't do things like beat your wife. You know what I mean? It's not a good look for anyone. And you make yourself unemployable. The studios have no choice. They have no choice. So, is fandom going to accept her? I don't know. All I know is that when people are asking me about, well, what about the incident with Ezra Miller? I can only assume that the Ezra Miller incident was investigated and they were satisfied that what happened was not what it appeared to be, the way it was portrayed in the media. I think that Warner Brothers, if they thought that Ezra Miller was actually a threat to anyone, that they would replace him as the Flash. Believe it or not, I think these movie studios are very, very careful when it comes to that. They want to make sure they're making movies for the public, and they want the public to accept these films. So, I mean, it's a bummer all the way around. But yeah, it is a bummer. This letter comes from just Daniel. Daniel says, Rob, I would just like to say I'm a fan, and your perspective on things is very insightful. I personally think I watched a podcast with you and John Campea where he compared Johnny Depp to O.J. Simpson. I don't want to tell you what to do, but all I'm saying is some of your friends have jumped on the woke train, and they're not getting off, and it might be Trump derangement syndrome. I don't know what it is, but I heard you jump off as soon as possible. Anyway, keep up the good work. I look forward to hearing your perspective on things. I don't quite understand all that. I don't know why anybody would compare Johnny Depp to O.J. Simpson. Look, here's a pro tip. Don't hit women. That's it. Just don't do it. Don't beat up women. I mean, my dad sort of taught me that bit of advice when I was a kid. Now, have there been times when, people get angry and they go against their grain? And yeah, I mean, that's a real thing. That's why, we have degrees in the courts about murder. There's premeditated murder, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, and especially in this day and age. But it's, pro tip. Don't hit women. Ever. But yeah, I don't think that Johnny Depp is O.J. Simpson. I do not. Amber Heard's still here. She's got a TV miniseries coming out, and Nicole Brown Simpson is not. So, yeah. This one comes from Omar94. Hi, Rob. I'm late to the party, but I have reviews for some films and TV shows I've seen. Oh, I haven't got one of these lately, which I didn't get around to seeing until over the last 2 months or so, with one exception, as my last review is for a movie which recently came out. But I'll get to that at the very end. Here goes. My first review is the original Mission Impossible TV show. I have a mixed response to the show. I did think seasons 2, 3, and 4 were good, but 1, 5, 6, and 7 were not. Season 1 was iffy because the team dynamics were not entirely good, mostly because the lead actor, Stephen Hill, whose performance as team leader Dan Briggs was very stiff, and his dynamic with the rest of the team was not very interesting. In Season 2, he was replaced by Peter Graves, who was cast as Jim Phelps. Graves was much better and had better chemistry with the rest of the team for seasons 2, 3, and 4. There was a consistency to those 3 seasons as the roster was always the same and the missions were very diverse as they took place in different locations. Starting with season 5 and all the way to 7, that's when it fell apart because the roster kept changing and during the same season. And also the missions started becoming very similar as they were no longer international and started being set in America, dealing with gangsters and organized crime. All in all, I would only recommend watching seasons 2, 3, and 4, but skip the rest unless you want to see it all. My second review will be really quick, and it is for the original Untouchables TV show. Unfortunately, I just could not get into any of it. I wish I did, but I didn't, since I found the show to be very bland. On the bright side, I did like the look of the show, as it was a period piece set in the 30s, so all the sets, props, costumes were actually quite good. Speaking of the Untouchables TV show, my third review is for the Untouchables movie from 1987. I saw the movie after watching the show because I didn't want to compare the show beforehand. Unlike the show, I did quite like the film, and I found it very entertaining. Now, I know Sean Connery won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, but I honestly thought Andy Garcia was the better supporting character, gave the better performance, and should have been nominated and maybe win. Unlike the show, the film also had really good sets, props, and costumes. Like the show, pardon me. My fourth review is for Michael Bay's Six Underground. That's his Netflix movie. I'm not a Michael Bay fan, but I still checked it out to see what it was like, and I didn't like it. A lot of the tropes in Michael Bay movies are here, like slow motion, corny dialogue, overuse of product placement, and crude humor. The action scenes were sometimes hard to follow as they were shot and edited in a very frenetic way. There were points throughout the film where it stopped looking like a film but a commercial instead, like this one scene where it pretty much turned into his Victoria's Secret commercial. You say that like it's a bad thing. And another moment where a blonde woman with sunglasses is standing on the middle of an empty street. I kept thinking to myself, those moments look like commercials. I don't typically mind pop culture references in movies and TV, but it was overdone in this film. Finally, the continuity was a little off. 2 moments in particular come to mind, the first being a scene where a penthouse is flooded with water and a blonde woman is in the room which gets soaked. But a few shots later, she's dry. The second being near the end, with an action scene on a boat, as one shot shows the scene taking place in broad daylight, but a few minutes later, and then it's nighttime. All in all, I was not a fan of Six Underground, but others might like it, so they can check it out if they're interested, but it's not something I want to see again. My fifth review is for Extraction. I found the film to be just average, only because the action scenes brought up the quality, as everything else in the film was uninteresting. If all the action was cut out, I would probably have a really hard time watching the film until the end. On the bright side, outside the action, there were 2 moments during the final action scene which I was surprised by, since I didn't see them coming, and I thought the best performance in the film was not Chris Hemsworth, but an Indian actor called Randeep Hooda, who played the bodyguard or someone of the kid who was kidnapped. All in all, I found Extraction to be just average and nothing special. My sixth and final review is for Aaron Sorkin's Trial of the Chicago 7. I did like this movie quite a bit. All the actors' performances were really good, but I wish Yahya Abdul-Mateen II had a bit more screen time. The only problem I had with the film was the ending being meh. Other than that, I found The Trial of the Chicago 7 to be a solid movie. These are my reviews. I know it was quite a long letter, but I did my best to make them as quick and to the point as possible. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, thank you for that, Omar. I'm going to jump over and see what you guys are saying here in the old Chatterooski. Let's see. Willow's here. Willow Yang. If the theaters make it through this and their prospects are looking increasingly bleak, do you think the new model of shortened theatrical windows and releasing big movies direct to streaming is likely to stay even after the pandemic is over? You know what, Willow? I honestly would like to tell you, no, they're going to go back to the old ways. But I don't think that's the case. I honestly don't. I don't think that's the case. I wish it were, but I don't think it is. I think that, the movie theaters, they were going to go to streaming anyway. I think this is just, it's an inevitability. An inevitability. We will see. But, it's not like the theaters are going to jump right back to full capacity anyway. It'll really be, it really, you know what? It's really up to the movie-going public. We were having this conversation last night. Will the movie-going the Republic too, but will the movie-going public return to movie theaters? Will they go? I think people want to go. The consensus was I was actually the person that was the least. I was the most pessimistic. I was like, I don't think people will. I think that or are people going to go back? I don't know. I don't think they will. But it'll really be up to them. We'll have to see. I hope so. But I think, look, to me, every movie is better in a movie theater. Every movie, and no matter what it is, low budget trash, or Avengers Endgame. I think you're always better off when you can see a film in the theater. By the way, that reminds me, this is a total. No, you know what? I'm going to say this for tomorrow's show, for the new episode of Let's Get Physical Media. I think episode 2 will be dropping tonight. We record a third episode tomorrow. But, well, hell, you know what? Why can't I say it twice? I have to give it up for Synapse. Synapse is a video company that I particularly love. I love Synapse. And they had put out Suspiria. It was Don May Jr.'s lifetime goal to put out the best version of Suspiria, Dario Argento's Suspiria, as possible. And they did. So I got to tell you, I love Synapse. Now, I had heard, this is crazy to me, I can't believe, I don't know, maybe it's because nobody knows this movie. Don May is putting out a film. It's available now. You can buy the Steelbook. I actually pre-ordered. I didn't even know it was out. But I wanted to talk about this because one of my favorite exploitation films of the 70s is a movie called Massacre at Central High that was made in 76. Came out in 76. And it's the ultimate bullying film. You got these toxic masculine guys who run the school. They beat people up. They're bad dudes. And then a new kid comes to town, comes to the school, and he will not put up with them. And he basically starts picking them off one by one. And the deaths are awesome. And it's a great movie. And I owned it on VHS, but it's basically been lost to time. And Synapse Films has put it out on Blu-ray. They did a Steelbook, and if you enjoy exploitation cinema, I cannot recommend Massacre at Central High enough. Now I'm going to put in the live chat. I would love to play it on here, but I'd probably get a copyright strike or something. So I'm going to put this in the live chat. Here is the R-rated trailer. I mean, by the way, spoiler alert, this trailer gives away so much, but it's hilarious. So Massacre at Central High, Synapse Films. Go to Synapse Films on the web if you're interested. Massacre at Central High is amazing. So check that out, and I'm happy to get it. Blofeld sends in a tip and says, do you think if all the theaters go under, they will forever keep No Time to Die from ever getting us for us ever getting to see it? No, I think eventually they're going to have to put it out. They need to get it out. Somebody's going to pay them. Eventually, they'll make it work. But, yeah. Calvin Bose is here. Hello, Calvin. How are you? Braxton-based How Does Starfleet Keep People from Being Hurt or Killed in the Kobayashi Maru test, with things blowing up and people like McCoy being blown across the room. He could have been killed there. Well, Calvin, you tell Braxton that I think that it's not as bad. I think people are play acting. I mean, yes, there are sparks, and yes, there's fire, but I don't think the explosions have any kick to them. And I think that, when McCoy says, what about my performance? And Kirk says, I'm not a drama critic. McCoy is performing. So it's not as dangerous as it looked. Emil Johansson is here and says, I just finished watching Jonah Hill's mid-90s. I think it's my favorite movie besides Batman Begins. Wow. But the title is sort of misleading because the movie feels universal, not just for 90s nostalgia. I really want to see that. I've not caught up with that, but I would like to see it. I heard it was good. I tune into your show sometimes because you have interesting things to say. Well, thanks, Emil. I appreciate that for you to say that. Very nice of you. Mr. Tickle Trunk. I mean, I can't say Mr. Tickle Trunk is all together as one word. Mr. Tickle Trunk is an onomatopoeia. It sounds like it is. It's just fun to say. You can't say Mr. Tickle Trunk and not smile. I love that. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in 2 super chats. Thank you for that, Mr. Tickle Trunk. But you know what? Whenever I see your name pop up, even that's enough sometimes. It just puts a big smile on my face. Max Relax sent in a super chat. I wonder if that means Max Relax, or it means that Max Relax, he's the most chill man you'll ever meet. I wonder if it's that kind of a thing. Max Relax. Thank you for the super chat and supporting the channel, Max. And that's how you have to say it. It's Max Relax. He's back. Or is it Max, just relax? I want to know. I have to know. Brendan Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, I, for one, have grown tired of Disney aping the junkyard visuals of the original Star Wars trilogy in every iteration they produce. Homage or laziness? I would love to see the visual splendor of the prequels updated with a twist or a new style entirely. What about you? Bro, I totally agree. I am shocked at the lack of imagination displayed in both Star Wars and in Star Trek. Now, with The Mandalorian, we get ships like the Razor Crest, but, you know, and I think part of the success of The Mandalorian is playing on that nostalgia. So hell, you know, when I see that action figure troop transport show up today, I'm like, I love that. I love that you finally have it on screen. It's great. I love seeing TIE fighters and X-Wings. All that is cool, but I'm like, can't really? Like, can't do anything else? But I'm with you. I don't understand why all of the galaxy in Star Trek has turned into everyone's got scrap yards. Why are there scrap yards when you have transporter technology? I just don't understand it all. Why don't they have transporter technology that allows you to beam things like scrap yards? It is so unimaginative to me. Why does everything look used? You know, not every planet, the Empire didn't look used. The Empire was gleaming. Their forces were gleaming. The only place that looked used was, well, Mos Eisley and, of course, Tatooine because of the environment. Just like if you go into a farming community, things get dirty. People are riding horses. They're out with their cows. There's a lot of mud involved. Things are dirty. They're a lot dirtier than they are in, say, like, I don't know, upstate Connecticut. And you're absolutely right. Like, everything, part of the fun of Star Wars was the diversity. Say what you want about the prequels, but I love the environment. I love Naboo, whether it's underwater or whether you're in the Royal Palace. I think it's pretty cool. I like all of that. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that one of the great things about Star Wars is all the different environments that you get to go to. And it's I don't know why this lived-in look is everywhere. I mean, it depends where you are, I guess. Kanan Unlimited sent in a super chat. Thank you very much. My amateur opinion is that studios seem to be releasing straight to streaming to buy goodwill and hope to break even financially. Use that goodwill to increase your odds at making bank after COVID. Well, I don't know, Kanan. I mean, I think that's an interesting point, but I don't necessarily think people have brand loyalty to a certain studio. I don't think that Wonder Woman 84 being put on HBO Max for Christmas is necessarily going to curry any favor with audiences 6 months from now. I think people watch what they watch, and then it's on to the next. And I don't know if there is any brand loyalty. I think that the studios are doing it for selfish reasons. It's an economic concern, and that's why they are doing it. So yeah, that's what I think. But I could be wrong. You know, putting something out for Christmas, that's a lovely Christmas present to give people. Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, Warner Brothers already owns HBO Max. I already answered this question. So Wonder Woman 84 isn't going to be bought. It's already owned, and Discovery gets increasingly worse every episode. I didn't deal with your Discovery gets increasingly worse every episode part of your question, Michael. But as I said, just because your parent company owns both Warner Brothers and owns HBO Max still has to pay to show movies, even if they're Warner Brothers movies. So there's that. Discovery gets increasingly worse every episode. Well, Here's the thing. So this week's episode of Discovery was written by a woman named Ann Cofel Saunders. Who is Ann Cofel Saunders, you might ask? Why is Ann Cofel Saunders important? It was her first episode as a staff writer on Discovery. She is also still on the show as a producer on season 4. If you follow her on Twitter, which I do, you would know that. I mean, I'm not expecting anybody should, but you can. Now, what's interesting about her is she wrote a Battlestar Galactica episode called Pegasus that she won the Hugo Award, I believe. She might have won the Nebula Award as well, but hold on, please. Let me make sure of this. I want to get this correct. But she is on Twitter, so you can follow her. Let's see. Yes. So she's a beautiful woman, by the way. Not that matters. But hang on. Let me make sure. Yes. Okay. So, and she worked on 24. She worked on Galactica, where she was nominated for a Hugo Award for Pegasus and won a Peabody Award. She's worked as a writer-producer on Chuck and the final 2 seasons of Smallville. She also won a Saturn Award for her work as the co-executive producer on NBC's Revolution, which was named Best Network Television Series. She was co-executive producer on, get this, The Boys. So she is no slouch when it comes to writing fantasy and science fiction television. So, you can imagine my surprise when I watched this last episode of Discovery, and once again, really, it's getting to the point where I'm going to break my screen over the top of my head at one point. I mean, I really am. It's getting that bad. But what's really interesting is she did say something interesting on Twitter. And let me see if I can find it. She wrote this on November 19th. Yesterday she said, "So thrilled by the positive response to season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. This was my first episode. TV writing is always a team effort. The director, the crew, everybody was amazing. The location shoot was just massive. Kudos all." And then she hashtags Michelle Paradise. Or she puts Michelle Paradise, who I don't follow. But she writes on her channel. Actually, no, I'm following her right now on Twitter. "Full-time writer, one-time actor, professional foreground model for millions of galaxies." Yes. Okay. When it comes to Discovery, do I think Discovery... Here's what I think about the season overall. I was really looking forward to I'm flat out. I was really looking forward to this new season of Discovery. As many people know, and now people are going to accuse me, I'll say this again, but as many people know, back before J.J. Abrams took over and Bad Robot took over the franchise, took over the Star Trek franchise, I, over a very sake-drenched dinner with Christopher McQuarrie and Bryan Singer, came up with the idea after Enterprise went off the air. We had a conversation about doing a new Star Trek series, and I said we should pitch it. Bryan will direct, Chris will write, I can be a consulting producer. And I came up with the idea of something I was calling Star Trek Federation. I even had Mike Kakuta design the logo for it. And then at the time I was working with Jeffrey Thorne, who is a Star Trek novelist and a television producer in his own right. He's a great writer. And I pitched this idea to him. And my idea was that the Federation, it was going to take place in the year 3000. So like I said, 1,000 years in the future, but like 3,000, not in the 32nd century. And the idea was the Federation was in decline. This was our idea. So the Federation was in decline, and what had happened was basically things had changed. One of the things that we said in our pitch was Vulcan and Romulus had reunited. The reunification had happened. So Vulcan had pulled away from the Federation, and they were concentrating on the reunification of Vulcan and Romulan society. We also talked about how the Klingons had become more like warrior mystics, like the Tang Dynasty. that the Ferengi, the Bajorans had become much more spiritual. A lot of things, but basically it wasn't a dystopia. The Federation was just old, and the mandate of exploring it, the Federation was just they were thin. It was just old, and the idea was, how do you and the metaphor was going to be, the idea is, with America was an incredible idea for democracy, but the problem is we've sort of grown complacent. And we are no longer nurturing America the way we should. And like a vegetable garden that isn't tended to, or crops that aren't tended to, they wither and they die. And that's kind of where the Federation was at. There was no cataclysmic event called the burn that makes no sense at all. There wasn't anything like that, but we wanted to make it much more sort of nuanced. And that's what our idea was. And there was a lot more to it than that. But the whole series idea was going to explore the notion of, how do you take a great idea that was great at first, fought for hard, but then it was taken for granted. And then it was sort of, in taking it for granted, it was allowed to wither, because things need to be nurtured. You can't take things for granted. And if you do, how do you get them back? And is it too late to get those things back? And that's what Star Trek Federation was going to explore. How do you, with a galaxy that had moved on, how do you, when you're left with something like the idea of the Federation, how do you bring it back? How do you resuscitate it? And so let's just say I wasn't surprised to see that the notion of a Federation in decline was something that, to be honest, I was told this before it was even announced, that this is what they were doing. Now, do I think that Discovery writers or anybody in Discovery ripped off this idea? I do not. I think the idea of a Federation, an empire in decline, is not anything new. I was thinking about, Rome. How did Rome fall? How did the Visigoths, what happened to Rome? So this is not something that was new and unique, although, the idea is certainly out there in the wilderness. And I do think that Discovery has borrowed from a lot of previously existing material out in the world, a lot of different material. So that doesn't surprise me. What I am dismayed by, and what I find to be hugely disappointing, is it seems to me that one of the things that, moving 1,000 years forward in the future in the Star Trek universe, one of the first things that you would do is create that future. And the future, to me, that's being portrayed in Discovery is monumentally unimaginative. And what they've done is they've basically have this all-purpose calamity, the burn. And as they move along, we find out, oh yeah, it didn't just blow up starships or whatever. All of subspace communications were destroyed. I mean, whatever they need it to be, it's a ubiquitous calamity, galactic calamity. Which, if you know anything about the distance between things in space, it doesn't make any sense at all. I hate all that. But I'm not going to get in. I don't want to get in to make this a Discovery bashing show. But I think that the problem that I have, again, is a storytelling problem. There is a lot of people that accept things at face value. Like, for instance, this week I was complaining about, and I wasn't the only one, I was complaining about the use of slang terminology. One of the characters, Adira, says to Stamets, well, you're the bomb. And Stamets later says he's not good with tweens. And I listen to this. To me, that's and knowing, who our writer is, somebody who worked on, Ann Cofel Saunders, who wrote this article or this episode. And I'm not going to say that she's necessarily to blame. That could have been in there. But to me, having that kind of specific slang, first of all, if you're living in a galaxy that isn't it's no longer just full of English speakers or Earth language speakers, but you're now 1,000 years forward from where we last saw Discovery, you have all the different worlds of the Federation. So, they do a good job of, in other science fiction movies like Blade Runner, city speak. a mishmash of different languages. Nadsat, the language that Alex and his droog talk, which is a mashup of Russian and English in A Clockwork Orange. Or the language they speak in Firefly, how conversations were peppered with Chinese or Mandarin and Cantonese because China basically wound up ruling the world in that franchise history. And so we have had previous explanations, or even in The Expanse, look at how the Belters talk. We've had plenty of examples of interesting communication in previously established science fiction films and franchises. So when I hear a human being who isn't a human, remember they're a trill, so they've got their memories of speaking a bunch of different languages from over the 1,000 years or whatever, however many generations they've been alive. When I hear a teen character using a term like the bomb, which is already an archaic teen slang even today. Like I say, oh, dude, that's the bomb, yo. Whenever I say that, or Affleck was the bomb in Phantoms, yo, even that is 20 years old. So when I hear a science fiction show, when a character says that, I'm out. I know it seems like a small thing. I lose all credibility. It loses all credibility with me. Now, people will say that, I've heard people say, many people have said to me, but yeah, what about like when they use archaic terminology in Star Trek? Well, in Star Trek 4, we see that Kirk doesn't know how to swear. Well, double dumbass on you. And Spock asks why he's using this language, and Kirk says, well, everybody talked this way. The use of colorful metaphors. And it becomes, clearly they've already dealt with like swearing. They have dealt with swearing in the Star Trek world already. So when you see people bandying about terms like shit and fuck on Star Trek in the 23rd century, we already know they don't. Colorful metaphors, but like this is something people don't use. That's already been established. And so when you see people saying words like fuck and shit on Discovery, I'm like, really? Really? You can't be more creative. To me, it's monumentally uncreative. Now, some people have said to me things like, well, what about other slang terms? Well, you have to remember, the characters that are on Star Trek, these are classically educated people. They read Shakespeare. They know history. And these are people that, like, when they use terms from Earth's past, it's because those are probably, we still use terms from Earth's past, but not everybody uses them. They're not in the common tongue, but people understand, especially if they're religious based or they're based in Aristotelian. We know things that are thousands of years old here. But I just think in a galaxy where you've got a million different alien races, and you're dealing with all these different kinds of people. One of the things that grates the most to me, none of the characters on Star Trek Discovery feel like they're in a Star Trek show. They feel like they're in a modern 21st century show that just happens to be set on a starship. They all act very contemporary. Whereas if you go back and you look at the characters on, say, the original series or even on Next Generation, they're acting in a very classical sense. They act like the stories, there's sort of I guess I would call it neutral, classical a way of being. And I'm still waiting for a story to develop in Star Trek Discovery. I don't know what the story is, other than this generic idea that somehow the Discovery is going to uncover how the burn was caused as opposed to anybody else in the 23rd century, or now in the 32nd century. That just seems so absurd to me. I'm like, what do you know that nobody else knows? But the way they've positioned this show is, I really thought it would have been really interesting, because these explorers, nothing in the 32nd century, nothing would be familiar. But with our character of Michael Burnham, none of that matters. She just runs around like the galaxy revolves around her. I'm sure the burn has something to do with her or her mother or something. But yeah, I find that Star Trek Discovery is, from a storytelling standpoint, incredibly unimaginative. And it's really, I'm disappointed by just how unimaginative it really is. Now, if you want to have characters that have discussions about their feelings all the time, well, there's your show. But I find them to be unearned as well. But that's just me. Ahmed Z is here. Ahmed Z says, hey, Rob, I'm hoping Disney will lean towards doing what Warner Media is doing with Wonder Woman 84, giving people the option to stream on day and date or go to the theaters if that's their preference. Having the MCU's Phase 4 movies and shows on Disney Plus would be amazing. Well, Ahmed, no one wants to see those shows and movies more than I do, but the fact is they learned the hard way. That Mulan experiment did not work for them, and they've been getting enough, as far as they're concerned, their success with 75 million subscribers, or maybe just a little bit less than that, they've had enormous success already. And even that, I don't think they can justify putting Black Widow on Disney Plus and expect any more growth than they've already been getting. So it's tough. It's hard. It's hard. Stubble McShave says, let's assume we're in the future and COVID is history. If Disney and Warner Brothers puts half of their big movies on their streaming services, will theaters have enough big movies to survive? And will there still be a market for theater subscriptions such as A-List? Great question, Stubble, and I think the answer is no. Every one of these big tentpole movies, these are the movies that specifically bring in people to movie theaters. And every one that gets put on streaming is another one that's not going to be there to resuscitate the theater-going experience. It's a big, major bummer. Don't think that it's not, because you're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, is the Snyder Justice League really going to be 4:3 aspect ratio? And I just saw Flash Gordon in theaters. Glad you're still doing the show. Well, Michael, that's 3 different thoughts. Apparently, I believe that would be at the IMAX aspect ratio. But yeah, I mean, I guess it is 4:3. I don't know. But if they do stay with the aspect ratio, the IMAX aspect ratio, there you go. I mean, look, I love the 2:3:5, the 2:3:9 to 1 aspect ratio. To me, that's what movies are. I think they're cooler that way. I think that's the case. I remember once John Carpenter, when he made Assault on Precinct 13, his first feature, it was 2:3:5 to 1. And he even explains that if you watch that movie, a lot of his framing and his compositions were very, very rudimentary, but he was trying to make use of that frame. And he said, that's movies, man. That's how he thought. I agree. I like the widescreen frame, but yeah, I mean, it might be 4:3. I don't know. I just saw Flash Gordon in theaters. I'm glad you did, because it's a great experience. I saw it opening night in 1980. I think it was December of 1980 at the Coliseum Theater in downtown Seattle, which is not there anymore. Glad you're still doing the show. Well, Michael, I'm glad I'm still doing the show as well. You know, it's getting harder and harder to come up with subject matter to talk about every day. I mean, I've been thinking about maybe doing it less. I've gotten concentrated on doing some other shows, more evergreen shows, like Elizabeth and I still want to do our Star Trek show. A Couple's Guide to the Final Frontier. It's called The Heart of Trek, a couple's Guide to the Final Frontier. We're doing that. So we should do that. Justin Toner says, hi, Rob. Have you seen the 80s horror documentary In Search of Darkness? I have not yet, but everyone says it's great. I supported the sequel In Search of Darkness 2, and so I'll be getting both docs on Blu-ray mailed to me. I'm excited for this. Really, really enjoyed the first one. I've heard it's great. I have not seen it, but I've heard it's awesome. So, yes. Alex, is it Sarah or Akara, sent in a super chat and says, so the Snyder Cut has seemingly sparked a new trend. Godfather 3 is doing it. Do you think this will happen everywhere? I vote for a Nightbreed Ultimate Cut. Well, what Alex is talking about is that there's a lot of people reworking their movies. Now, this isn't necessarily new, but it seems like it is. Remember, Robert Wise with his team came back and in 2001 released the Star Trek The Motion Picture, the director's cut. Oliver Stone has revisited Alexander 3 times, the original release, and 2 other times after that. Ridley Scott's films, everything from Kingdom of Heaven to Legend to The Martian to The Counselor, multiple versions of those films exist. But it is interesting that directors get to go back after a time and rework their movies. Michael Mann did with Black Hat recently. And Coppola has done, this is the Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, a.k.a. Godfather 3, which I can't wait for. This is the 3rd of Coppola's reworking of his films. He went back and did Apocalypse Now, Final Cut. that was his third version of Apocalypse Now after the theatrical version and Apocalypse Now Redux. He then went back and did Cotton Club Encore that came out on video, which I thought was wonderful, especially compared to the original version. He went back and put in a lot of the music and the scenes with all of the black singers and dancers that were cut out of them. I mean, they were cut out of the movie at the behest of the producers when the movie was originally made. Here is a movie literally about a black nightclub, the Cotton Club. And he had to cut out all the music and he put it back in. And the Cotton Club Encore came out, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm a huge Godfather 3 fan. Is it as good as Godfather 1 and 2? No. Godfather 1 and 2 are my favorite movies. Godfather 3 is not. And yes, I understand. Godfather 3 should have been about Tom Hagen and Michael Corleone battling it out between themselves for the soul of the Corleone family, trying to eventually take it legitimate. Or maybe it would have been interesting if it was Michael that kept trying to take it legitimate and Tom Hagen who wanted to keep the criminal empire going. But either way, there's a lot about Godfather 3 as it exists. I know. Sofia Coppola, tell me, it's like you're beating a dead horse. I get it. But I do like a lot of Godfather 3, and I like the overall story, so I'm really interested to see. By the way, this is the third version of Godfather 3. There's a longer version that was released on home video, and then there was the theatrical version. So this is the third version of Godfather 3. And I'm really excited. I've got the box set of Nightbreed. I don't know if Nightbreed will be helped, but there's a director's cut of Lord of Illusion, so maybe get the definitive elements. But I don't know if they have all the definitive elements for Nightbreed. I'd like to see it though. Stubble McShave says, how strict are the rules for the 5,000 to 10,000 words for the short story submissions? My story is somewhat less than 5,000. I guess I could add some description or a scene or two if I need to. Well, here's the thing. I'll tell you who actually, I was thinking about pages, and it was B.L. Alley astutely who said, you got to give us like a word count. Pages are not like screenplays. I mean, a short story is not like a screenplay. So give us a word count. And he's right. And I was thinking between 5,000 and 10,000 words. But if you want it less than 5,000 words, that's fine too. If it's less than 5,000 words, maybe I should just make it between up to 10,000 words. Maybe I'll just say that. So Stubble, it can be less. I'm changing it now. It just can't be more than 10,000 words. Can't be more. But if your story's good, and you'll need 4,000 words, who am I to say you need more words? I am not. I'm not that guy. Topaz Dude 17 sent in a super chat and says, Rob, I was wondering if you have ever read The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. I've read a lot of sci-fi, and it's by far my all-time favorite series ever. Corey learned from George R.R. Martin, in my humble opinion, student and master. Well, James S.A. Corey is a pen name for two dudes. I want to point that out. And I've read the first two books of the series. Yeah, James S.A. Corey. Let me hip you to that. By the way, I retweeted a tweet he made. It's the pen name used by collaborators Daniel Abraham and Ty Franick. So they write as James S.A. Corey. The first and last names are taken from Abraham's and Franick's middle names, respectively, and S.A. are the initial of Abram's daughter. The name is also meant to emulate many of the space opera writers of the 1970s. In Germany, their books are published under the name James Corey with the middle initials omitted. So there you go. I read the first two books. I really like The Expanse. I've read so much science fiction that I wouldn't say that they were my favorite books. They're very entertaining, and I think the show is really, really good. I like it a lot. So, they've learned from. I mean, clearly their world building is great, and I'm a big fan. Big fan. Sean, are you trying to butter me up? Well, thank you for that, sir. That is above and beyond. Sean says, Rob, don't confuse my criticism with dislike. I think you're the most useful commentator on pop culture on YouTube. Sean, I never. So here's the thing. Sean, M and I have been going back and forth about a lot of things regarding things like Star Trek and stuff like that. But no, I don't confuse criticism with dislike. First of all, thank you very much for the generous support of the channel. I very much appreciate that. But I've never thought that way at all. Like, look, it's all about discourse. As long as people are talking about things, I don't. There's like, there's a lot of people that I go back and forth with about Star Trek Discovery, and I don't understand. Like, look, I've spent my life studying storytelling. I used to be paid as a professional reader. I've been a story analyst, call it that. I've been a development executive, and I spend most of my days thinking about stories and scripts and movies and things like that. And I don't, and there's a lot of people that think that I should say this, like something like Star Trek Discovery, I think it's bad science fiction. Forget that it's Star Trek. I think it's bad science fiction, and I'm disappointed with it every step of the way. Not necessarily because it lacks canonical fealty to the rest of Star Trek, but it's a show that I desperately want to like. And as I'm watching it, they do these things, and I think, why are you doing that? Like, how in where have we ever seen this before? In what kind of story have you seen this exact moment? The Anti-Trekker, if you ever watch the Anti-Trekker, he hates Discovery as much as I do. And he does these reviews of every episode, which are pretty good. But like in this episode, he pointed out that Michael Burnham, once again being insubordinate, finally gets called on it. And the head of Starfleet basically asks her a question, and she dresses herself down. And you just look at it, and the way they've written Michael Burnham, or as I like to say, Space Jesus, is weird to me. It's very bizarre. So I don't understand where all of this has come from. I don't understand why they painted an A or etched or whatever. Why is the Discovery now the Discovery A? I mean, it was refit, but the Enterprise was refit in Star Trek the Motion Picture, and it didn't get an A till they had to rechristen another Constitution class refit, the Enterprise A. So when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, who decided to make it the A? And then I ask myself, in Star Trek history, when a ship, a Federation starship, is given a letter after its designation, its NCC number, it's been because that ship was lost. It was destroyed. Now, I guess you could make the argument that, well, the Discovery was so upgraded that they decided to make it the A. Well, it's not like there was any other Discoveries hanging around the shipyards that it was going to be confused with. So when they make it the A, I scratch my head and I say, well, that flies in the face of Star Trek history. You've given it a refit, even though it's 1,000-year more advanced refit. It's still a refit, and the first time we ever saw a refit starship was in Star Trek the Motion Picture, and it was still NCC 1701. No bloody A, B, C, or D. So when I watch something like that on Discovery, I'm like, did you guys watch Star Trek? Like, did you watch it? Like, why is it A? And what they're doing is, for whatever reason, I don't know who decided in Star Trek 4 to make it the Enterprise A in the Voyage Home, and then they carried on that tradition in Star Trek The Next Generation by making the Enterprise D, which is kind of cool because then you ask, well, what happened to B and C? And they eventually told us. But in Discovery, they're doing something that doesn't fit with previously established Star Trek lore that has been going on for a long time. And I just sit there and I ask myself, I have to sit back when I watch a show, I'm like, why? Why did you do this? This isn't how this works. And I feel that that's all of modern Star Trek. This isn't how this works. And as a longtime fan, I mean, does it really matter? No. I guess it doesn't really matter. But when I watch the show, part of the weird, quirky things, one of the things I like about Star Trek are all these crazy details that I've been following since I was a kid. And I always thought that what an unusual thing to do when they rechristened the Enterprise in Star Trek 4. I'm not up. I'd have to find out who. I don't know if it was the Mike Akuda to suggest this. I don't know. But how did they come up with that idea of putting an A in the next to 1701 in the first place? I mean, why not just keep it the 1701? Why the A? Well, that was something unique to Star Trek. So then follow along. Well, here comes Discovery. Well, we're just going to throw an A on the ship because we wanted to. Well, it wasn't destroyed. It's the same ship. You gave it a refit. So why does it have an A? I don't know. But watching Discovery, for me, is like that with everything. Because they go on and they just do stuff, and you're like, wait a minute. How does everybody just suddenly know how to use... I would think everybody would have to at least go to school to learn how to use all their new components. But no, here's your new comm badges, and everyone's like, woo, look at this, hey. I would think that would be a little problematic. Anyway, Regis K said... actually, pardon me, let me go back. I'm still back at Sean M. Thank you, Sean M. Fernando Barrero became a member. Thank you for that. And Lynn Lucas became a member. Thanks for becoming a member. Mr. Tickle Trunk says, even Babylon 5 used Star Trek writers. Star Trek Discovery's dumb. Well, look, when you go back and you look at Galactica and you look at Babylon 5 and you look at past Star Treks, they all kind of made sense and their world building was extreme. I feel like, why are there so many? We've now seen 2 different environments where they basically have scrap yards and you can come buy stuff. And to me, scrap yards, the idea of a scrap yard like this is so 20th century. And once again, they have capital ships just hanging above a scrap yard. I mean, you'd think in the 30th century or 32nd century, you could beam a ship apart. You could just beam it apart. And why you have like tubs of scrap. Like, again, why wouldn't all of this stuff be stored, patterned somewhere? And when they would need something, how many stem bolts do you need? You just materialize them. We have 3D printing now. What's that going to be like 1,000 years from now? Coupled with transporter technology. When you'd walk into a scrapyard, they literally have scrapyards like we have them in the 21st century. Now, if I was doing this show, I'd be like, okay, what is the 32nd century equivalent of a scrapyard? Well, it would be clean. You wouldn't have any. It'd be like, okay, well, we can print whatever you want. You should technically be able to use transporter technology to create a whole starship. I mean, they have holographic technology. They talked about it when they first showed up the new Federation. Like, I still don't know, why is the Federation not on Earth? Why is the Federation hiding? If the Federation is helping all of these planets and people can go there for aid, why are they hiding? For what reason? I still don't know. But Regis K says, your idea for Star Trek Federation reminded me a lot of marriage. That, my friend, is hilarious. I hope marriages are better. But marriage is like anything else. Like, if you want something long-term to endure, you have to take care of it. Brendan Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, I think that's easily the best thing to come out of The Boys is the wonderfully menacing performance of Anthony Starr's Homelander. Without pigeonholing him, I think he would make a fantastic Lex Luthor. What do you think of this choice? Anthony Starr's, I think he's fantastic. He's a little short. I think Lex Luthor needs to be physically, not Kingpin-like imposing, but like I would love to have seen Clancy Brown shave his head and be Luthor. He could probably do that today with that voice. But I think Anthony Starr, I don't know if he's right for Luthor. I'd have to see his portrayal, but I love him. I think it's great. Topaz Dude 17 says, where do you see the future of sci-fi and TV and movies going? I hope that authors like Ted Chiang, Arrival, are the future in terms of what is adapted. Well, he was adapted with Arrival, obviously. We've got the 3-body question, or the 3-body problem being adapted by Benioff and Weiss. I'm looking forward to that. I just think there's so much great science fiction. The problem with adapting science fiction, and especially a lot of these giant space opera shows, is they're expensive. You can't buy anything off the shelf. You have to create your worlds. By definition, you have to make costumes. You have to make sets. You have to have a lot more special effects than you normally would. So it becomes problematic. But there's so much. I can't even begin. Like, if somebody said to me, Rob, there are 2 things that I would make if I was a studio executive and had the power. I would make Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. And I would make Greg Bear's Anvil of Stars. Now, that's the second book in a duology, but they've been trying to make Anvil of Stars. Phoenix Pictures own these books forever. But I think Anvil of Stars should get made into a 7-season series. And if you read it, you look, you have to have vision. You have to understand, like, why would you think it could be a 7-season series? But I do. And if you wanted to make it a 7-season series and you didn't think the book would sustain that it would only be 4 seasons, then you go back and you make The Forge of God. The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars are a duology, which I think could be made. The Forge of God is basically about the end of the world. Anvil of Stars is about the aftermath of what happens because of it. And they're great. And I would, every time they've tried to make Anvil of Stars into a movie, they always, which is great. I think Anvil of Stars is the story that you make into a movie. They always have to add the first 30 pages to show the end of the world, which I don't think you need. But that's just me. Anyway, I think the future of science fiction is if we see things like the Foundation series that's coming out, if Dune succeeds, if we have more and more classical science fiction that gets adapted. I'd love to see, The Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness adapted. I think that would be great. That would be awesome. So I think literature is definitely the future of televised science fiction. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Absolutely. So, yeah, why not? Yeah. Let me see. See if I have a bunch of letters that I still haven't got to. So if I haven't got your letter, don't think that I. You know what? I'm going to read this just because it's fun. Eric Gant writes in. Oh, you know what? This is actually a whining about movies letter, but I'm going to read it here. We, of course, watched Star Trek Generations on Whining About Movies, a Star Trek movie that I've never liked. But Eric Gant writes in and says, "Greetings, Elizabeth and Rob, writing in with some thoughts on Star Trek Generations. While I'm not a fan of the movie, I look forward to hearing your views on it. For me, it's a mixed bag. Here are a few things that I enjoy, and I'll start with a few things that bug me about this film. I'll start with the good. The Enterprise B. I was never fond of the Excelsior starship design introduced in The Search for Spock, but the tweaks that were added to turn it into the new Enterprise won me over. Something about the flared secondary hull just strikes me as more appealing than the dumpy, clumsy look of the Excelsior. This update of the design is just more sexy. The Enterprise D interior shots. It was a joy to see the Enterprise D. First of all, you know what? I'm going to answer these as you've written them. I always thought it was strange that in Star Trek III, the Excelsior is supposed to be the AMC Pacer of space. It's supposed to be ugly. It is a clumsy, dumpy ship. And that's kind of why the fact that it was adapted and brought into regular service in Star Trek, especially in Next Generation, made sense because they had this model that was built, so why not use it? And making Captain Sulu the captain of the Excelsior gave it a little bit more credibility. But I agree with you. I did like the redesign of the Enterprise B from the Excelsior model. I did like the flared secondary hulls. I did not like the way oversized giant impulse engines they stuck on the back. I thought that was a little odd. But I did like the flared secondary hull. The Enterprise D interior shots. It was a joy to see the Enterprise D on the big screen. The bridge, 10 forward, and even the corridors all seemed larger and more realistic in the movie, and I loved it. I agree. The saucer separation scene in particular did an outstanding job of illustrating what sets the Galaxy class apart from the more utilitarian ships in the fleet. Watching the highly trained, proficient Starfleet officers racing through engineering, the Jeffries tubes in the corridors in a desperate bid to avert disaster was thrilling, and watching their interaction with the terrified civilian population during the crisis really drove home the fact that this ship isn't just a military vessel, but indeed a strange but awesome hybrid of luxury cruiser and state-of-the-art warship. That is very well said, Mr. Gant, and I agree with you 100%. We certainly park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Kirk. Now and forever, Shatner's James T. Kirk is Star Trek. Star Wars has Luke Skywalker, DC has Superman, Marvel has Spider-Man, and Star Trek has Captain Kirk. Seeing him on the big screen during the film's first sequence was pretty awesome. When the Enterprise B first encounters the energy ribbon, you can actually feel Kirk's inner turmoil as he watches the green, untested Captain Harriman try and deal with the emergency. I agree. On one hand, Kirk knows that his decades of experience make him more qualified to handle things, but at the same time, those decades of experience have also given him the wisdom to recognize that usurping Harriman's authority could crush the crew's morale and destroy a potentially solid Starfleet officer. I agree with you 100%. Kirk seems to almost vibrate from his efforts to restrain himself, and when Harriman finally has the sense to ask Kirk for help, Kirk's relief is palpable. Shatner acted his ass off during that scene. I agree. To cap it all off, his heroic demise during that sequence carried a real emotional punch. In my opinion, that was a fitting end for a hero of Kirk's stature. If the writers could somehow have made the end of the film, I think it would have been improved. If the writers could have somehow made that the end of the film, I think it would have improved the movie by a considerable margin. Which brings me to the bad. While Kirk's death while saving the Enterprise B delivered an emotional punch, the blow was softened by that we all knew he'd be returning later in the film. In that first sequence, Kirk is awesome. His appearance in the second half, however, is boring. On top of that, we never got the fan service I was looking forward to. How would Riker, Crusher, Worf react to meeting a Starfleet legend? I don't know about you, but the idea sounds awesome to me. But instead of seeing Kirk interact with the bridge crew of the Enterprise D, we got the Nexus. 100%. Really stupid. Kirk should have died piloting the Enterprise D saucer section to crash land on the planet. I think that's what he should have done. And in it, he would have died saving the ship, or at least piloting the ship down. The Nexus, don't get me wrong, I can totally accept the Nexus as a concept, but the way it was depicted was pretty shitty. Picard's little Christmas fantasy was lame, as was Kirk's ranch house scenario. The Nexus was a neat idea, but it was poorly executed. I agree. It's all over the map. Doesn't make any sense. Kirk's real death. After the heroic sacrifice of the film's opening sequence, the final demise of James Tiberius Kirk was painfully anticlimactic. Falling off a bridge to die alone on a deserted rock with no one to bear witness but Picard? Come on, man. Really? Final verdict, 2.5 glasses out of 4. Eric G. I agree. I think Generations is all over the place. All over the place. Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to read another one. William La Rochelle is here, but back to Generations, Eric. It's all over the place. And they were writing Generations while they were writing All Good Things. They should have made All Good Things the movie, and Generations could have been the series finale or something. But it was just, again, like Discovery, there are problems I have with Star Trek Generations. Like, you ask yourself, okay, here's one of my problems with Generations, the biggest problem I have. You have the Nexus. The Nexus is a void, it's a doorway to some dimension where people's fantasies are made reality, where so let's run that down. The Nexus is a spacefaring energy ribbon that is traveling around the galaxy that has enough power where it can destroy starships. Starships, if you get in the way, they can be destroyed. Well, that's interesting. I can see that. Some rogue spacefaring energy ribbon. But then you're asking me to believe that inside this ribbon that can destroy starships and kill people, or maybe it doesn't kill them, somehow this same spacefaring energy ribbon reads a person's mind, and not just reads a person's mind. So the Nexus has to have intelligence behind it, whether it's being piloted or whether it's some phenomenon. It reads a person's mind and it makes a decision based on what it's found out about a person's mind, and then provides them a reality where they can actually live. A three-dimensional. These two things to me is the epitome of bad science fiction. You're asking me, this is too much of an ask. I can't believe something like this in our universe can exist, because what you're saying is, on one hand, powerful energy ribbon, and then on the other hand, this powerful energy ribbon has some kind of sentient intelligence that can read a person's mind, make a decision, apparently anybody that it comes across, so it can read anybody's mind from any race of people anywhere in the galaxy. I mean, obviously we just see evidence of humanoids, but that doesn't establish that non-humanoids can't have their minds read. So, and then it puts you in these places. So it's making value judgments based on your personality after reading your mind. Now, My suspension of disbelief is broken there. And I don't know about any of you. A lot of people just accept this shit. And I think that's fine if they do. But if you are trying to tell a story, especially a science fiction story more than other kinds of stories, if you are going to come up with these crazy concepts, and everyone's always trying to equivocate with me. Well, Bob, can you believe that an 11,000-mile long space amoeba exists? Yes, because in the context that they present it in, there is nothing in my mind as a viewer to make me not believe that it exists. See, I believe, and this is my own personal belief, and I've said this on the show a million times, that you get basically one big ask in terms of your premise. People will believe one big ask. The nexus is multiple big asks at the same time. Like the idea of the nexus could have been anywhere. Like if there really was, like the shore leaf planet. The shore leaf planet, we've seen somehow it can read your mind. And the people in the shore leaf planet can then read your mind and manufacture what you're thinking about. Now, when you're on a planet, and you're a beautiful planet like the shore leaf planet, and you're walking around like some beautiful glade, and you're a human being, and they say it, Tonya Barrows says, the ensign at the beginning of the movie, she's like, I was thinking about Alice in Wonderland walking around here. Boom. They've now explained where the white rabbit comes from, and I believe that. Your ask is that there's a planet that manufactures whatever your fantasy is, but it's the fantasy that it can detect from you at the time. And that's what they establish in that episode. That makes sense. So that tracks. And when you're writing fantasy or science fiction, you have to make your audience believe. Now, I don't believe that a spacefaring energy ribbon that's traveling through the galaxy that can destroy starships also is a void where there's some kind of intelligence where it reads your mind and then gives you a reality to live in. These are many different asks that I can't buy into. And I think that's why Generations doesn't work. Because then not only that, then you're asking an audience to believe, an astute Star Trek audience, you're asking an audience to believe, so is Captain Kirk's fantasy that he's living in a log cabin in the mountains chopping wood with a woman and his dog Buster? Where has that been established in any previous iteration of Star Trek? It hasn't. So that's the story they're telling you. They're telling the audience that, Kirk believes he's with some woman named Antonia? Who's that? So the in terms of the storytelling, suspension. Now, there's a lot of people that are like, I don't understand what's wrong with that. Well, what's wrong with that is you have till 1994, you have all of this previously existing Star Trek lore, and that flies in the face of that lore. So you're not allowing yourself for longtime fans, and people are like, well, we're not making these movies for the fans. Well, but you are making a Star Trek film, and you are making a Star Trek film that brings Kirk and Picard together. So you can't allow your story to just end by having Patrick Stewart and William Shatner come back. You have to tell stories about Kirk and Picard. And the Kirk story they tell in Generations, once he goes into the Nexus, they're telling a story that is no longer a Star Trek story. It's being made up, and it doesn't work. And I don't think the conceit of the Nexus, if they just said that there was a spacefaring energy ribbon that destroys ships and all that, I'm like, okay, I'll buy that. But reading people's minds and creating alternate realities where they can live there, and there's an echo of Guinan in there, all this stuff, you've now gone into Magic World, fantasy land, and I can't buy that. Discovery does that all the time. Discovery blows into fantasy realm, and a lot of people are just buy into it. I can't. As an astute Star Trek viewer that has had, there's been many inconsistencies, but that's why I dislike Generations, because Generations is asking me to believe something that breaks even Star Trek credulity. It breaks it. I can't believe in the Nexus. And once you get into the Nexus, why is Picard dreaming he has kids, and why is he dreaming about Christmas and all this stuff? It would have been more interesting with something else. But that's why I can't, and when I read stories, if that gives you insight into me, that's how I decide whether I like a story or not. Do you believe? Did they make you believe? A lot of people aren't necessarily, they don't care as much. So they'll buy into all of these things. But that's why when I watch Star Trek Discovery and they're etching an A on the outside of the hull, I'm like, why are you doing that? You're now flying in the face of every previously existing. And I know it's a little thing that most people don't care. Most people are like, I thought it was cool they put the A there. Well, fine. That's great that you think it's cool. And I can't take that away from you. I do not. Because I liked the tradition that they started in Star Trek 4 by adding an A next to the 1701. And then a year later, when we meet the Enterprise D for the first time, it says D. So then you now have established lore that's it's only for Star Trek. Star Trek has done something new. When a ship is destroyed or rechristened, they take another ship and they rechristen it to be an Enterprise, it gets the letter A. But there's a methodology behind it. And the methodology is the ship has to be lost. And with Discovery, they just, no, we don't have to do that anymore. And we're changing it. I'm like, okay, but here's what I don't like. I don't like the fact that they feel that they can change it. Well, we can do whatever we want with Star Trek. Okay, but you are making Star Trek. That's one of the things, I mean, you brought the Millennium Falcon back and you changed the dish. That was okay. I actually kind of like that. It's still the Millennium Falcon. It just has a different dish. I'm in. I mean, too bad the movie sucked, but I was in. But when they do they do this all the time on Star Trek Discovery. And I'm like, why? You've already got a world. The world building has been done for you. Just extrapolate on what we've already seen. It's like the design of starships. When we're seeing these starships in Federation headquarters, I mean, this one's supposed to be the Reliant. Like, what? Like, you're just pulling stuff out of Wikipedia or Wikipedia, whatever. You're going on to Memory Alpha and just taking stuff and throwing it up willy-nilly, and I'm supposed to be like, wow, look, it's the 1,000-year-old Reliant in this new design. I'm like, your design's terrible. Make it better. Star Trek had such great design in it. And, anyway. So, William La Rochelle says, hi, Rob. I appreciated hearing mention of the book Flicker by Theodore Roszak. Okay, let's see. Do I have that? Can I get it? Yeah. It's right here. This book is one of my favorite books about movies. And if you have not ever read this book, I cannot recommend this book. Oh, you can't see it. You know what? Let me do this. So you can't. There we go. This is one of my favorite books that I've read about movies. It's fictional, but it's very cool. It is. This is not signed, but this is one of these books where when I read the paperback, I'm like, oh, I have to have a first edition hardcover. I get that way about certain books. And if you like, I can't recommend this highly enough. You got to read it. So, yeah. Check that out. Look. Space Godzilla. I brought Space Godzilla down. These are great. These SM Arts, or SH, whatever. Figure Arts figures. They're great. I love them. Anyway. That's an aside. So William La Rochelle says, hi, Rob. I appreciated hearing mention of the book Flicker by Theodore Roszak. I was given a hardcover of it in the mid-'90s. I had not heard much about adaptations other than Darren Aronofsky at one time planning it, and then apparently not. The closest I've seen is the Masters of Horror episode Cigarette Burns, directed by John Carpenter. The commentary track doesn't refer to that book, only that Carpenter thinks Cigarette Burns is similar to his movie In the Mouth of Madness. But I don't see much connection to it. So it is instead very close to Flicker that I would but I wouldn't hold my breath for an adaptation of that book. It is worth reading for a film buff, especially those with an interest going back before 1990s cinema. The one thing they could do to distinguish it from Cigarette Burns is to put more emphasis on the relationship between the protagonist and the woman he has an affair with who owns the cinema. When I read the book, I'd assumed it went as it went on that might be dropped, but then I suspect so did the writer of Cigarette Burns. On another note, I went against my vow and actually watched the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. Though there are a few amusing lines here and there, it is about as bad as I feared. I don't care much for the new characters to begin with, but it makes Poe seem pathetic and stupid. With the technology of Star Wars, would it really occur to an X-Wing pilot to roast food using his jets? Of course, the Amazing Wonder Ray has one character flaw, insensitivity to her pupils' feelings, supposedly, and not being friendly enough. Okay, if they say so. It is a very safe space message. The show does accomplish the silliness of certain story points, but also tries to justify them. The bumper establishing shot of the Endor Death Star is a running gag because each time a chunk falls off with gravity while it is still together, as if that explains the existence of any of it in The Rise of Skywalker. Meanwhile, I suspect the main purpose of this special is to mock the idea of using time travel to change the bad continuity and to erase the last trilogy. Instead of the world between worlds or the veil, it is a magic stone. It is used so episodically and randomly and so often that the premise is already a well-worn joke by halfway through. The last issue I wanted to comment on is just my 2 cents on the Michael Bay thing. The one episode I don't like of the YouTube channel Every Frame is a Painting is the Bayhem episode, which is too kind to Bay. One of his tics is crossing the axis when it is not necessary and doesn't really inform the scene. It just looks like a mistake. He'll do that in a conversation between 2 people or more, I know. Meanwhile, I remember the more thoughtful John Singleton commentary for Four Brothers pointing out an axis cross I'd not noticed, so it was okay, and he explained why he allowed it. I highly recommend people watch the Red Letter Media combined review of The Wolf of Wall Street and Pain and Gain. 2 films based on true stories where only one finds humanity in characters doing the wrong thing. But superficially, the multi-camera approach you mentioned to me is all part of asking, why does there need to be a director when that is the approach? Apart from someone who cracks the whip, supposedly. Excluding the first Transformers, which was okay, and Bumblebee, which was someone else's movie, they are more comparable to the second Pacific Rim movie than the one directed by Guillermo del Toro. And if someone looks at Spielberg's War of the Worlds, there is a discriminating eye designing it all and deciding what to conceal and reveal. Even in one of the better Bay movies, The Rock, I found the push-in, head-turn gimmick repetitive, and I began to see his movies as not being shot for the editing room, but instead for trailers and dailies. There are many fancy shots that work autonomously and might impress executives in rushes, but they can be a headache-inducing experience once edited together. For me, it is a point where movie cutting stopped evolving and began to devolve with Bay and some others. I don't disagree with you as a film editor myself. I'm a classicist. I like classical forms and I like classical looking films. That's why I love David Fincher's movies so much. He's a modern classicist. A classicalist? A modern classicalist? Is that a term? Did I just make something up? I don't know. With Star Wars, we have Lucas firing the first editor Fox gave him, who tried to let the master shots dictate the pace of scenes when they were not intended to be used that way. That's right. With Die Hard, you have John McTiernan firing another Fox editor Fox had provided, this person resisting push-ins or dolly moves that appeared unmotivated, but which did, in fact, help externalize the stress and tension of characters and the pulse of the moment. I feel like Vertigo, Jaws, Poltergeist, and maybe one shot in Wes Craven's New Nightmare are the only time a stretch shot or dolly zoom-in has worked and felt appropriate as opposed to being perfunctory film student stab at it. That's when you're zooming and pushing at the same time, so you do this stretch image. It's what happens when in Jaws when Sheriff Brody is looking when the shark first attacks and he's on the beach. There might be one crane shot in movie history that is not there just to show production value. The moment in High Noon when Gary Cooper steps out into the street and the frame pulls back to show how alone he is. Maybe I'm being a purist, but when you consider how many people want the gig of the director, I like to get a sense that we can at least pretend the frame is motivated. Oh, come on. What about like the scene, the crane shot in Gone with the Wind when they see all of the maimed soldiers there's a lot of crane shots that are really good. I love the shot in Shawshank. Well, I guess it's a helicopter shot where you see the whole prison and you see a bus first come in. I also think the difference between a solid action or horror movie is the quiet moments. Do I feel like I'm still in someone's confident and discriminating hands, or it's just keeping people in focus and reading scenes? The shark attacks in Jaws 2 are still pretty good, but the quiet parts are like a completely relaxed muscle and not even especially playful in terms of how they're constructed. The moment of Brody's kid helping pick up shells after his freakout is nice, but that is more acting than direction. The Fast and Furious movies are just outside of my want-to-see factor, so I've only ever seen them on DVD long after the fact. I saw the first and then nothing until someone handed me 6 and 7. I barely made it through Justin Lin's 6 and kept looking at the clock. It felt generic and delegated, no different than I feel about Michael Bay. Yet I gave 7 a chance. I like James Wan from Saw, and oddly, right off the bat, I felt, even though I knew Furious 7 had the challenge of its star Paul Walker passing away during the shoot, I felt I was in good hands. These are things I can rant about, even though I'm less concerned about what other people do these days. Most of us do what we can with whatever's at hand and fake it as best we can without the distraction of too much support, crew, and money. But I weigh in just because there's so much talk about meritocracy and who deserves what position. Some feel deserving for slugging it out in another discipline or a position like first AD, or for building a personality, or for making the connections, or for being a member of an underrepresented group. I just like to see what people can do. Me too. Conversely, I just watched Sofia Coppola's movie Somewhere, which I understand has deep meaning for her. Wow, I really was disappointed with it. But it does that thing of leaving the image bare and being languid. I like sitting under the shade in the summer and just relaxing, but I don't really want to watch other people doing that in a movie. I know Sofia is a worthy director because The Virgin Suicides is playfully and skillfully put together. I can't claim that anything was covered wrong or presented incorrectly in Somewhere. She and her DP did a good job with a single sustained shot of pole dancing twins fully clothed for an entire song, and then later doing the same thing with another song with no reaction from the lead. Somewhere may very well show how anhedonia sets in for people in the overstimulated and well-paid word of, you know what? I don't know this word. Anhedonia, like I know what some of it is, but let me go look it up because I don't know it. Hang on, let me drop this sucker into Google and see what it comes up with. I don't know this word. Anhedonia. Inability to feel pleasure. How did I not know this word? Anhedonia. I guess I said it right. Inability to feel pleasure. Wow. That's what a great word. How come I don't know that word? I know it now. Now I'm going to say it all the time. Anhedonia sets in for people in the overstimulated and well-paid world of movies. But there's a point where we say, okay, we get it. The same or similar principle applies to action movies. Under Spielberg, I am watching a dance if there's a fight. Even a Spielberg movie with content I don't like, I can still watch again just to see how people and objects move. Under Bay, there can be spectacular action and clanging and tragedies that I should care about, and I'm thinking, okay, we get it. And stealing a glance at my watch. Metaphors be with you. William La Rochelle has a film in competition, if you have not seen it, which you should see, about tinfoil. And I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but check it out. Yeah, here's the thing. I come from the school. Now, when you're making a low-budget independent movie, you can't look at the one movie I direct and hold me to this because we were just trying to, I had company moves every day and we shot 40 locations. It was a nightmare. But I think that every single shot in a movie should be composed and have meaning behind it. And whatever that meaning is, I don't mean to say that deep meaning like you're some philosophical screed on something. No, but wherever you put the camera, there should be some kind of deeper meaning behind it. Here's my actor. The way the actor is framed should have something to do, or the way the camera is going to move should have something to do with illuminating something we should know about the actor at the time. And I really believe that every single shot in a film should be composed and thought about. But when Michael Bay is shooting, like, I'll give an example. For Tango Shalom, there was a dance sequence. There's a big dance sequence at the end of the movie. Now, they just shot the dance with multiple cameras. And we were left to get out of it what we could. And it was frustrating because there are moments of the dance that mean things cinematically and thematically with the story. And Gabe Bologna, the director, only had so much time and tried to get those things, but wasn't entirely successful. Now, we tried to whenever we could in the edit. But, it's like when Paul Verhoeven talks about sex scenes. Most people, when you shoot sex scenes, you let the actors go and see what happens, or they know what they're going to do, and they go through the paces, and you shoot it. And sex scenes can stop a movie, because once you know a character is having sex, if you're not titillated, then you're not advancing the plot. The storyline that should always be moving, and I've always said one of the Rob Burnett rules of editing is once the information that you wanted to convey in any shot has been conveyed, whether it's dialogue, whether it's a glance, whatever it is, you cut away. You cut away after the information has been conveyed. And and that could be a combination of bits of information that you're hoping to convey, but once you've conveyed that information, you cut away. Anyway, that's why when I watch Michael Bay movies, like you said, William, you're watching these setups of 8 cameras, and whatever happens, they get out of it what they get out of it. They pick their best shots from all 8 cameras and cut them together. But to me, one of the problems with that is that it becomes meaningless. There isn't anything going on. There's no deeper meaning. Like you talk about push-ins to people or close-ups, they all have meaning. When a camera pushes into someone's face, that means that's telling an audience that, oh, there's an emotion or there's something going on with that character that we need to register. And it makes you feel that. And if you don't, then something is wrong. And every shot should have some kind of meaning that you're trying to convey through that shot. Now, maybe the meaning is only apparent to the director, that it's very hard perhaps to understand as a general audience what the director was trying to convey. But if the director himself is conveying some kind of meaning, I think collectively you're going to feel something more than you would if somebody's just shooting a scene they don't really know how to convey meaning. And I think that's the difference between a great director and a journeyman director. And we all know the difference because we can feel it. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a long show, and it was pretty cool. Sean M says Generations is terrible. I accept that. Discuss the ultimate computer instead. Well, are you trying to convey that the ultimate computer is a bad episode of Star Trek, which I will never agree to? I think the ultimate computer is a great episode of Star Trek. I think it's a fantastic episode of Star Trek that deals with hubris, and it deals with how man can be replaced in our age of automation. But I could go on forever. So the Ultimate Computer is a second season Star Trek episode about Dr. Daystrom, played by William Marshall, Blackula himself. And Dr. Daystrom was the creator of the duotronic circuit. And he has created, which is the basis of all the technology in Starfleet. So he's created the M5 computer. And his desire was to see the M5 computer be able to command starships so they could do things that human beings couldn't. Make decisions faster, react faster. And they're going to have war games. So the Enterprise is fitted with the M5 computer, and they have war games with 4 other Federation starships. Well, and during this whole time, Captain Kirk is wondering, am I going to be replaced? You know, is my life going to be forfeit? Is everything I do as a starship captain, is it going to become meaningless in the face of automation? So anybody who's lost their factory job when they're replaced by a robot knows exactly what Kirk was feeling. And even now, as you move forward into the future, an episode like The Ultimate Computer, even though it's over 50 years old, becomes more relevant because that it has a story that's really valid. And then what ends up happening is the M5 starts destroying starships for real, and it's brutal, and it's amazing, and it's hardcore, and Kirk eventually is able to shut it down through talking it to death. But then you find out that Dr. Daystrom, in his desire to, the pressure for him after coming up with a duotronic circuit, the pressure on him to succeed, to do something even bigger and grander, was so extreme that what he did was he impressed his own memory engrams onto this computer. It basically is him. But what in doing that, in trying to make it more like him, because Daystrom, he's the smartest man he knows. In his hubris, he's like, I'm going to use my own mind, my own keen mind, and make it a part of the M5 computer, and that ends up leading to the M5 computer's destruction and downfall and ultimate to destruction. It's a great episode of Star Trek, and it has many different themes, and these themes are easily understood. And no one's having long speeches about, oh my God, I feel terrible. I mean, there's a great speech that's building on my work. You hear and William Marshall's great as Dr. Daystrom. But it's a great episode of Star Trek. It's never considered top 10, but it's still a great episode of Star Trek. Timbia the Spider Monkey goes, why did the Discovery put an A on their ship? Because they not know or they care. Remember when Short Trek showed the Enterprise A blowing up from Search for Spock, only it wasn't the A in that movie? It was still the refit. Yep, I know. I mean, and that's another thing. When you watch a show that shows a flashback to a scene from Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And you see that it's the Enterprise A in that scene. I know it seems silly and people are like, well, you can't. It shows me that the people making the show are not paying attention. And the fact that they allowed it to get by and nobody noticed, nobody said, proves that they don't know Star Trek well enough to be writing the show. So, yes, I agree. Anonymous says, Rob, I disagree that Kirk does nothing good in the second half of Generations. Kirk Shatner's wood chopping skills are a thing of beauty. Actually, they are. Clearly, Shatner's an outdoorsman. He is. Sean M. says, there are better things to discuss than Generations. There are. Cinema Gulp says, hey, Rob, thanks for the long show. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to your moderators. They are the best. Love to you all, from Cinema Gulp. Well, on that note, I'm going to stop this show, man. I want to say thank you to my great moderating staff, starting with Mike Bodden, Greg Smith, then, of course, the Richard. And the Richard's always throwing dance parties or watch parties or whatever's going on over at the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page or the Whining About Movies Facebook page. By the way, we are not doing Whining About Movies tonight. We're doing it tomorrow at 7:30. We're doing Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, after our Bondathon. Austin Powers tomorrow night at 7:30. So join us for that. So I also want to thank Robert Pariso is here. Who else is here? Joshua Levesque is here. MC Blackcap is here. I want to thank all you guys for moderating because you're great. Did I say Joshua Levesque is here? Yes, he is. So thanks, gentlemen. I very much appreciate all that you do. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to bring this to an end. What a great show. What a rollicking, fun show this was going to be. Wait a minute. I think I missed a couple of super chats. Hooey, sending a super chat. Thanks, Hooey. Thank you for that. And I think that's everything. So, okay. I'll be back tomorrow. Remember, by the way, I didn't say go Seahawks. Go Seahawks last night. Good game. We won. And now I'm going to wear my lucky beads from Trinidad the Island Man. Your Island Man. And Trinidad, thank you very much for the box o' love. That was great. It was great to get that. Anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring an end to Robservations, episode 560. I can't believe there's only 40 episodes left until, I mean, does that put the 600th episode in New Year's? if I do episodes like every day. Wow, that's some crazy shit, man. I don't know, 600 episodes. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Imagination Connoisseurs. Thank you for supporting the channel via sips and super chats and memberships and all that. Thank you for your letters. I've still got more to read. If I haven't got to yours yet, I'm going to. And thanks for writing letters to Whining About Movies. And also, please send us letters to Let's Get Physical. We're going to be recording our third episode. I'm hoping to drop the second episode tonight. And I got to finish another video too, which is ongoing. But yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it all. Thank you, Imagination Connoisseurs. And remember, there's 10 more days left to submit your movie to the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival, which is pretty cool. And there's more to put up. A bunch of more stuff came in. You're going to see it. And with that, I'll say, have a better day.